Good morning and welcome to the inaugural symposium of the Houston Methodist Institute for Robotics, Imaging and Navigation. Streaming live from Houston Methodist Hospital here in the Texas Medical Center, we are here today to explore an intersecting world of robotics, imaging and extended reality. I am Dr. Stuart Carr, Director of Innovation for the DeBakey Heart and Vascular Center, and alongside me is Dr. Alan Lumsden, Department Chair for Cardiovascular Surgery and Director of the DeBakey Heart and Vascular Center. Now, before we begin, I would like to thank all the event participants who have made today possible. We have a very exciting lineup planned that involves a wide range of participation specialities, and we hope that you will leave this virtual event with a better knowledge of surgical robotics and extended reality applications. Now, this event has two methods of content delivery, one from our live DeBakey CV studios, such as what you're viewing now, and the other from live hop-in sessions. If you're watching this on either live stream, Twitter, Facebook or YouTube, we ask you to port on over to Hop-In by registering for free at MIRIN.tech. That link should be in the screen that you're seeing. This will allow you to unlock all of the features of today's events. Secondly, once you're in Hop-In, you can go back and forth between our live studio feed by clicking on the stage icon, or into the Hop-In sessions by clicking on the sessions icon. Talks from our live studio are limited to 5 to 10 minutes in length and primarily serve as an overview. In addition, the Hop-In sessions are 30 minutes in length and include adequate time for audience question and answers. So, if you like what you see and hear on the live stream and want to learn more, please check out the speakers' Hop-In sessions, which is scheduled 10 minutes after their talk. Also, please feel free to visit one of our many vendor expo booths to learn more. These can be accessed at any time. Now, if you're having fun at this event, which we hope you are, feel free to share your enthusiasm via social media using a variety of hashtags seen here in the slide. Now, in regard to today's agenda, we will start by patching in live to MIRI to get an overview of some of our robotics and image-guided navigation systems. Session 2 focuses on the robotic health pipeline and covering exciting new surgical robotic systems and academic-based research programs. Finally, we end with session 3 that uncovers some of the partnerships and developments currently underway within our Center for Surgical Extended Reality. Now, before we crack on, I'd like to turn over to Dr. Lumsden just to give an overview of our new Robotics Institute.
Well, Stuart, first of all, thank you, and thank you all for joining. My thanks go to Stuart specifically for taking what is a concept to becoming a reality. And here's really the idea. We really think that we're one of the foremost imaging centers with the relationship we have with Siemens, and we are very interested in surgical robotics. The holy grail is really to take imaging and integrate it into these robotics platforms. So this is really the first step in a multi-year journey of building this concept that we have of integrating imaging into robotics. And we hope that you'll come along with us for that journey. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you again, Stuart, for helping host this, put it together, and then host it today. And hope you enjoy the Hop-In platform. Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you. Right, so we're going to go in live to MIRI, which is our Institute for Technology, Innovation, Education. And we have a reporter on site, Dakota Hill, and she is going to be interviewing Dr. Rodolfo Oviedo about his robotics program using Intuitive's Da Vinci systems. So Dakota, are you there? Can you hear us?
Hi, good morning. Yes, I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Coming in loud and clear.
Right.
So over to you.
Great. Well, welcome to MIRI. Yes, welcome to MIRI this morning today. Our first speaker and presenter is Dr. Oviedo. He's the Houston Methodist General Surgery Director of Robotics of General Surgery, and he's going to be doing a demo on the Intuitive Da Vinci SI system today using a Lazarus 3D model, as you'll see behind me. Okay. Dr. Oviedo, take it away.
Thank you, Dakota. Thank you, Dr. Lumsden and Dr. Kaur. It is my pleasure to welcome everybody to the XR Symposium at MIRIN. It is an honor to also introduce Hannah, one of our talented urology residents at the surgical console. She is performing a procedure that urologists perform all the time, including reconstruction of the bladder with the ureter and making a connection. And so, as you can see, Hannah is suturing with a surgical robot. It is a system known as a telemanipulator. In other words, it is not independent. Hannah is in control. The robot is simply an extension of her mind, her brain, and her arms. And so from the beginning of the minimally invasive surgical revolution at the end of the 20th century, all the way to the current state-of-the-art platforms and technologies that are available, including intuitive surgery has advanced at a very fast pace, and robotic surgery is not the exception to that rule. In fact, this is just one of multiple surgical robots that are available throughout the world. This happens to be the most common one, the most popularized and most common and most prolific surgical robotic system in the United States and in the world. But now there are other platforms that I'm going to be discussing later on during my talk in Hoppen. And so this is the Da Vinci SI model. When I started my journey as a robotic surgeon on the East Coast of the United States several years ago, more than 8 years ago, I was using even an older model than this one. It was the Da Vinci S. And that never actually stopped me from continuing to advance and learn and master my learning curve to be able to become a better surgeon. I believe in surgery because it saves lives, because surgery gives years of lives to patients. And I believe in minimally invasive surgery because if I were a patient, I would like to have the least traumatic effects on my body. Well, because of this, robotic surgery is here to stay. I would argue that robotic surgery is not the future. Robotic surgery is the present. Why? Because it has been around from the beginning of the 21st century. The first surgical procedures done in the GI tract and also cardiac surgery and other areas of the body were performed in the early 2000s and in the decade of the early 2000s and on. And nowadays, general surgery is a specialty that is seeing the fastest growth of robotic technology. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about a machine that has algorithms that allows it to replicate the moves of the surgeon. So the surgeon is just sitting down a few feet away, a few meters away from the patient. The patient has ports or channels that go through the abdominal wall through very small incisions, usually the size of a little coin. And those incisions are made so that the channels go through. We insufflate the abdomen with CO2. That way we can visualize all the organs. We use a camera with three-dimensional visualization, very complex system that allows the surgeon to see everything 3D. And then we have three other arms that we can manipulate at our will. I'm talking about manipulating them, two of them at the same time, and the other one by exchanging one of the arms for the other. And so we can, all of a sudden, we have become surgeons who have 4 arms in total at our disposal. We use both of our feet to push on pedals, and as you can see, Hannah is doing some of that. And we use both of our hands to manipulate the controls, just like as if we were doing open surgery. So to me, as an expert in robotic surgery, I can tell you, and doing open surgery at the same time, I can tell you this is the closest thing that we have nowadays to open surgery, except with the least invasive effects, the least invasive traumatic effects on the human body. Now, one more thing I wanted to point out. If you pay attention, the range of motion is excellent. You have multiple joints on the arms. The arms continue to move at the same time as Hannah continues to move her wrists. She is also in control, and she's actually performing suturing. As you can see, this is a very precise type of suturing done inside the body. Usually the robotic technology has been used for complex procedures where there are very, very tight corners in the body, such as in the pelvis. Colorectal surgeons use it all the time. Urologists use it all the time, gynecologists as well. In addition, thoracic surgeons will use it in the mediastinum, in the chest. Also, general surgeons, we use it all the way from the esophagus to the rectum. It's an incredible technology that allows us to operate in very tight corners in areas of the body where it's not very easy to do anything with straight stick laparoscopic instruments. We can manipulate everything with better range of motion compared to the human hand and wrist, and we can do everything at the same time. This is just one example of it. What she's doing is if you pay attention to what she's handling the needle with her right hand. She's going to continue and bury that needle at an appropriate angle. The needle is going to emerge. She's going to pick it up with her left, and she'll continue to create and fashion that suture line. We are able to make connections in the human body, in the GI tract. General and bariatric surgeons like me, we can connect the stomach to the small intestine or the colon to the colon. We can do a lot of amazing things while reducing the cost. Because in reality, when we're doing this, we don't necessarily have to use surgical staplers all the time. We use them, but not necessarily all the time, because now we have the luxury of making a connection by hand, as if we were doing it with the open technology, with the open approach. Robotic surgery consists of a surgeon console. At least the Da Vinci system has a surgeon console where the surgeon will sit down. We'll have a binocular set where you can approach with your head. As soon as you can approach that binocular set, then the robot is activated. As a safety feature, if you step away from the console, it's no longer activated. So that's a safety feature. That way nobody can push anything accidentally and cause any harm to the patient. At the same time, there are endo-wristed instruments and articulation that allow her to move intuitively, and that's why the company chose the name, I'm sure. She moves intuitively as if she were performing an open operation, and that simply replicates the moves with the machine. And then there is a set of pedals. If you can see, some yellow, some blue, there's a couple of them black. They have different functions. Some of them have to do with energy modalities. In surgery, we use electricity. We use electrosurgical energy. We make use of voltage and the voltage differential and electrons and current, and in order to manipulate tissues and break the cell membrane and make the cells explode, so to speak. And that way we can perform surgery not by burning anything. It's not cautery, it's not fire, it's simply electricity. And so these instruments are connected to electricity, to an electrosurgical generator. The other component is what we call the vision cart. If you can take a look at that tower with video capabilities, it has a monitor where the surgeon is able to draw, just like drawing on an iPad, to indicate something specific to the trainee, to the resident or fellow, or the surgeon who's learning the procedure. And at the same time, we have the patient cart, which is the robot with all of the arms acting on the patient. So in conclusion, robotic surgery is here to stay. It is the present, not the future. It is my pleasure to introduce you to it. This is just one example. And if you're interested, please join me at my hop-in session as well. Thank you, Dr. Kaur and Dr. Lumsden, and thank you, Dakota, for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Hannah, as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oviedo.
Yes, back to you, Dr. Kaur and Dr. Lumsden. Thank you so much, Dr. Oviedo and Hannah.
Awesome,
Thank you both. Superb. I just want to highlight there, you saw some organs and you saw the phantom inside that model there, in that side model of chest. That was given to us by Lazarus 3D, okay? These guys have been working very, very hard for a long time now, but I'm pleased to say that they just got their technology FDA approved, okay? And they will be given a session at 9:50 and hop-in. It's called Surgical Rehearsals, now FDA cleared and reimbursable with Lazarus 3D's pre-sure technology. And as Dr. Oviedo also said, he will be given a session in hop-in at 9:30. And we also have another robotic session at 9:30 by Dr. Min Kim looking at cardiothoracic cases. So next on the agenda, we are going to Stryker, Mako. But before that, we have a video given to us by Dr. Kevin Park, and he's actually an orthopedic surgeon here. Now, I do warn the audience, this is a little bit graphic. It's a total knee replacement. So we'll see that for a couple of minutes before going back live to Mary.
So the patient wishes to proceed with total knee replacement surgery. Standard midline approach to the knee is performed. This is followed by medial parapatellar arthrotomy of the knee. Using the robotic technology, we then measure the knee deformity. Here, as you can see, the patient has 14 degrees of flexion contracture and 6.5 degrees of varus deformity. Standard knee examination is performed at knee in full extension, at 45 degrees of knee flexion, and at 90 degrees of knee flexion. The robotic technology allows us to objectively measure the patient's collateral ligaments. The robotic arm is then brought in to make the distal femur cut accurately. It is also used to cut the proximal tibia accurately. Then, using 41 cutting guide, we then prepare the femur. After the preparation of the femur and the tibia, the trial components are put on. The purpose of the trial components are to assess the ligament disbalance of the patient's knee as well as proper sizing of the knee components. Robotic technology is again used to objectively measure the patient's collateral ligaments. The patient's distal femur and proximal tibia is clean with irrigation, and the final knee components are implanted into the knee using bone cement.
Hi, good morning. I'm back at Mighty, and I'm here to introduce Mr. Ryan Loy with Stryker, and he'll be demoing the Mako robotic system. Ryan, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Dakota. Thanks, guys, for having us here. We're really excited to be here today. What we have here, we have the Mako robotic system. Essentially, what we're going to do is the system itself does total hip, total knee, and partial knee. Today, we're kind of focused on total knee here. This came out about 2016 and is really taken off. It's kind of the bread and butter of the system now. So we'll go ahead. Let's kind of jump over to the screen here. Jess, if you want to pull up the bone model. So preoperatively, the patient will go and get a CT scan. We're going to take that CT scan and we're going to make a 3D bone model out of this. Now, this is a sawbone, so it looks nice and clean, right? So let's kind of negate that fact. But we'll take this bone model here, and what we can do with this is on the top right of the screen here, you see we have a 6/6. So before the surgery even starts, we already know what sizes we have. Which allows us, if you have a smaller OR, smaller facility, we can really customize those trays and sizes for what we actually need during the surgery. We don't need to bring in kind of the whole gamut. All right. And the nice thing with the system as well is, manually, with manual instrumentations, you have lots of blocks and jigs and towers that you need in order to make your cuts. With the system, though, we use the mechanical access, so we're already getting to that point. So, Jess, let's go to the CT landmarks. And so to find our mechanical access, manually you're putting, 5 degrees of valgus, 3 of external on your femur. Here, we can simply use a CT landmark to use our hip center. And then we can go down to our ankle center, use our 2 malleoli points here. And that's going to give us our ankle center. And so now the robot, it already knows the mechanical access of the patient. And so it really allows us to get rid of any of those blocks, towers, and cutting guides. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of jump in to the procedure now. So again, we'll start the case. Go ahead and go to the hip center real quick. So we'll kind of take a quick flow. Again, with the sawbone, things get a little tricky. So we've already captured the hip center here. Essentially, you're just doing small to large eccentric circles to capture that hip center. Again, we're matching up that CT landmark to the patient's native anatomy here on the table. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and we'll capture our 2 malleoli points, medial and lateral. Next step, we'll go ahead here on the screen and we're catching, we'll call them checkpoints. Essentially, it's just a tracker that we've put into the bone of the patient. And it's a way for us to make sure that our arrays here have not moved before cutting. So that way, everything we have on the screen, again, we're able to verify it's still in place here before we make any bony cuts to protect the patient. Okay, so we'll go through both of those checkpoints here. And then we'll switch out our probe. And again, for the sake of time, we've already done our tibia registration to kind of save a couple minutes there. Well, let's go ahead and we'll do our fine registration on our femur. And so here the surgeon is just going to take this probe, and I'm stepping on a foot pedal right now to capture these points. And the surgeon is going to poke through any cartilage as he's going through these fine registration points here. And what we're doing is we're mapping out the bone, again, to make sure it's the same bone that we have on the screen to what the patient is on the table. In your first few times, it might take you a minute or two to do this. Or once you get going, a lot of guys will, do this in just about a minute for the whole bone registration here. All right. So we got our registration here that's passing. We'll go ahead and we can pop these bubbles here. Again, for sake of time, we'll just pop a couple of them. But again, this is a way just to verify that all of our points here have passed. Okay. So that's good now. So again, we've already, and then you'd go on and do the same thing with your tibia registration. Now we're kind of into the bread and butter of the system here. Take out a little bit of flexion. So if you see on the screen, on your flexion pose, if you're between 85 and 95, that's where we're going to start capturing some data here, okay? So if you look on the screen here, as I play with the joint, right, the surgeon can use a couple different instruments to open up this flexion gap here. But essentially, the numbers we're shooting for on the bottom right, once we retake poses, those will clear up here. But we're really shooting for somewhere between 18, 19, 20. Okay, and the reason we want to do that is that's when we stick our implants in, that's the thickness of our implants that we want to put back in. So we'll kind of come here, I'll pull a little traction, and let's say that feels good right there. Just go and capture that. So now we captured my medial flexion gap is 16 millimeters thick, and then my lateral is 18. And again, we'll probably shoot for 19. It's going to go somewhere in the middle right now, for an example. All right, and the surgeon will bring the leg out into extension. Again, anything under that 20 degrees. Let me get my hand in the sawbone here. All right. And so let's bring this out just a little bit. And again, the surgeon right now, you're not shooting for a specific number. You want to go for the ligament tension here. So that way, you want the knee to feel right now the way that it will feel at the end of the case, okay? So let's go ahead and take that. We'll give us kind of a softball here. It's a nice little sawbone. Take it out. We'll put up the flexion real quick. All right, so here, now we can really manipulate our implants. So again, instead of doing soft tissue release at the end, we can do a lot with the bony implants here. And so that way there's faster recovery for the patient, less opioids, less cost on the hospital for, length of stay is much shorter. So here, let's go ahead. We can manipulate our base plate. So let's pin laterally like you have there, Jess, and go ahead and put a degree of varus in there. Great. So now we're looking pretty good there. And let's go up to our femur. And let's go ahead and put 2 degrees of external rotation on our femur. So now we're 19s across the board. That 18 kind of rounded down, so it's probably
got a workshop
18
today,
and a half,
12
so
to
18.4.
So,
so that's kind of the bread and butter.
So we're running a little bit behind time. I think this is a really, really nice example of combining imaging with the robotics. And so several components. The planning is done in a CAT scan. These, I call them tracking balls, are attached to fixed points, and we can update the registration of the imaging to drive the robot. So that's kind of a cue to kind of move on to the next robot, and that's going to be with Nova Signal. And we're going to have Dr. Garami and Aaron Lindenbaum are going to demonstrate how this works.
And just one last thing, Stryker Mako are actually having an on-site workshop today at MIRI. So if you want to actually see that robot in person and get a little bit more custom with it, go to MIRI today 12 till 5 and send us an email before and we can register you. Okay, so Dr. Garami is next.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dakota. I'm back here at MIRI with Dr. Garami, who will be demoing the Nova Signal transcranial Doppler system.
Welcome, everybody. I would like to introduce the team. Jonathan Esigan just joined me as a new fellow, and Aaron Lindenbaum representing Nova Signal from Los Angeles. The machine, what we would like to show you, and I would like to have a camera shot on the pod. We're doing a quick pod check, so make sure before we start to use it, it's moving. And this is the same size of TCD probe we would use. And actually the idea why we have a robot, because TCD is so underutilized because of the lack of training. And right now what we have is 2 spots on each side, and a robot able to find with the camera shot and in this space going to locate the middle cerebral artery for us. Jonathan, please lay down. What we're going to do is position his head in this head cradle, and we are positioning and holding something in the middle, and we have this light making sure that we are right in the middle. So this way we secured almost there. And the next spot is I want you to have a shot on the screen as well, because what it does is give you a simple method that please bring the probes in. And right now we are bringing the probes in until I have the green lights. I had a yellow because I went too far. So I have 2 green lights. I have 2 green lights. We are on the head, and you see the image as well. So once the machine captures, And after 15 minutes of thinking, again, our robot will start searching for the signals, and again, bilateral at the same time. And on the screen, you're going to see also the robot window. This robot window, again, representing the eye and the ear, and this is the robotic space, and one of those arrows is showing that as I will start searching, this is the 50 minutes thinking period. And again, this is the NovoGuide second generation in one. And look at the M mode, already getting a signal. The top screen is motion mode from 30 to 80, capturing anything in that hemisphere. And the bottom screen is our spectrum. In the spectrum, you will see the speed of the flow in centimeter per second. And basically, this is how fast was it. So we are definitely made the technology improve that anesthesiology is not waiting for us in the operating room when we start a case. And this is, again, I would say that even with the robot having a manual probe position, doing it, and again, bilaterally, impossible. I would do it one at a time. And capturing this signal, able to trace it and able to get back if some movement happens with the head. But also we can find the ACA, that's the blue signal on one side, and you can go down with the depth and look at the ACA as well. So not just the middle cerebral artery, but the ACA. And then manually I can override the robot and look at the PC as well. So Dr. Lumsden, I want to save you some time, and if you want to give a little bit more clinical scenarios for our robot, we're here today, and also we're happy to showcase the robot. Thank you.
So basically what they're doing is demonstrating blood flow. It's just like putting a probe on or feeling the radial pulse. This is actually looking at the flow in big blood vessels inside your brain. But can you show us the robot itself? We've seen the signals, but we really want to see the robot moving, because essentially it is using AI algorithms to actually search through the skull to actually pick up and optimize these signals. We use it anytime we are operating and we actually interrupt the blood supply to the brain, or if we're working and actually may knock off particles which go on up to the brain. This is what is very useful in letting us follow this.
And if we could maybe see a little bit more footage of the NovoSignal TCD robot, Dr. Grammy, if you guys are still there. There we go.
Yes, we are still here. We're just going to bring the camera closer if you give us a second.
Yeah, what we were looking at on the screen really was the signal.
Left side to get closer, just to overhead shoot.
So just the audience, we're actually hearing stuff in our ear as well. So we're trying to get this.
So now you're going to see the
there
left,
we go.
middle cerebral artery signal, and we're manually overriding the robot, trying to show you how the robot is really moving. Did you guys see that? Can you appreciate the movement on the robot?
No,
we could
not
zoom
really.
out a little bit. That would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, you see it now.
There
just
we go.
inside where you see the robotic probe in there.
Yes.
You see it's searching for a different signal right here is really distal. Go back. Did
There
you guys see that?
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay, cool. So,
so
that's
that's
how fast the robot is moving, and this is how able to kind of track the signal, even with some local search. And I think that's maybe the next application, to put it on the ambulance and maybe scan those patients that are coming in with stroke, that you're able to keep these signals steady. So I think definitely we can go out from the operating room and use this in ambulances. Some stroke team already using some CT scan. This is a little bit more real time. So again, not just one snapshot, but you can monitor the blood flow in the brain. You can monitor recanalization therapies as well. And I think that's the key element why the TCD is the hemodynamic and kind of dynamic examination for us.
Okay, so just before we go to Ponraj, I mean, the beauty of this is this has been incredibly manual, and it takes time. The beauty of this is you can potentially use this where you don't have an expert to actually put these probes on. and we can send the signal, so you can actually watch the signal remotely. So we could have an expert like Dr. Grammy anywhere in the world essentially interpreting these signals. And at the end of the day, the most critical organ in the body in terms of lack of blood supply happens to be your brain. This is the single best way, in my humble opinion, of monitoring that. And so the combination of this robotics and being able to view this remotely really broadens out the number of patients who can benefit from this. Okay, I think we're going to move on back into the hybrid room. And is Dr. Chinadurai there?
So they may be getting their lead aprons on as we speak. So,
Okay.
so just so you know, what the audience knows, we're going into a room that has a lead line in, okay, because we take x-rays in there, and it also has an MRI scanner in there. So they obviously have to wear protection when they're taking x-rays. And just before we go there, I just want to mention as well, at 9:40 in Hopin, we have the Mako Smart Robotics session, which is given by Stryker and Ryan Loy. And then at 10 a.m., we have a session by Dr. Huey Lin here at Houston Methodist Hospital. The title is Hands-Free Intracardiac Echo and Structural Heart Intervention. So again, if you're not ready in Hopin, if you're watching this on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, please go to mirin.tech or click on the link that you're seeing now and register, and you'll be able to access all of that functionality. You'll be able to ask questions, view the streams, check out the exo booths, etc., etc. And if you're having fun, please go on social media with all the relevant hashtags. So let's see if the guys are ready to go back in MIRI. Dakota, are you there? Okay, so we'll give them another minute. Dr. Lumsden, maybe you can comment on just the partnership that Houston Methodist has with Siemens.
So basically, we're going to take you into a room that is like a cath lab. But it differs in that Siemens, which is one of the big imaging companies, essentially mounted the X-ray machine on the end of a robotic arm. So that's robot number one that's going to be in there. And the advantage of that is that one of the challenges we have is shooting X-rays, and the patient moves, it blurs the X-rays. So one of the advantages of these arms is that you can actually move what we call the detector faster into a variety of different positions. So that's the imaging part of this. The second part of this is actually catheter robots, and Siemens actually have just bought Corindus. And so this idea that we can take a CAT scan of your blood vessels, draw a line up the middle of your blood vessels, which I think of as a flight path or a glide path for a robot, and send those coordinates, much like you saw with the Mako system, into the robot and allow it to move automatically. And so that's a lot of the work that's actually going on up in this lab that you're about to be introduced to. So let's try again and see if they're ready for us.
Yeah,
Rishi.
good morning. We are back at Mighty, and now we're entering into our hybrid OR suite. Panraj with Siemens Healthineers is going to give a demo on the Siemens Artis Zigo and Corindus CorePath. All right, Panraj, take it away.
All right, thank you for the intro. Good morning, everyone. My task in the next 20-25 minutes or so is to give you a quick glimpse into the hybrid operating room, and also kind of try to highlight a little bit of how imaging and all the robotic systems that you have seen are mainly for open surgical procedures, but also how these robotic solutions come together when we do procedures in a hybrid operating room. If you don't mind walking into the room with me, I'll give you a quick overview of the technologies we have in the room, and then we'll go through one particular task with the robot. Well, I hope you can see. So this is one of the hybrid operating rooms, which is almost the same replica of what we have in the clinical operating rooms in Houston Methodist. So what is a hybrid operating room? For people who are not familiar with this, it's an operating room where you can do both open procedures and minimally invasive catheter-based procedures. So it really gives us the opportunity to do the imaging and the intervention at the same setting without sending the patients back and forth to imaging, getting the patient to the operating room. So what we are seeing is one of our X-ray angiography systems, which is a robotic angiography system. The reason it's called robotic is from the base till this point, it's actually an automotive robot made by a company called KUKA, which really worked with Siemens by combining the robotic technology with the C-arm, which is an X-ray imaging system. in the operating room. So you have that flexibility of using imaging whenever you need it, and if you don't need it, you can park the robotic system. So, and what we have on the table is a 3D printed model of a patient's vascular. So what we are going to do in the next few minutes is do a cannulation of one of the aortic arch vessels. So aortic arch is one of the bigger vessels in that arises from the heart, and it gives 3 branches to the head, and we are going to cannulate and get a wire into one of those branches, all robotically with nobody by the table side except for the robot. So that takes me to the robot. So this is the Correctus robot. So this is currently being used extensively in cardiovascular space, and also it has indications for peripheral vascular diseases. So what we are trying to do in this particular research lab is, can we do these procedures remotely? That's kind of one of the research projects. I'm going to go through a few slides, maybe 2 or 3 slides, to give you a framework. If you can zoom into the monitor here a bit. So the reason I wanted to show some of slides is, so this is a quick link in case if you have a picture, you can take your camera, you can take a picture. You can look at what all the technologies we have in this room at your own convenience. So this is kind of what I wanted to lay out as a framework. Even through the rest of the talks today, you're going to be exposed to so many robotic technologies that are out in the clinical field. But for it to really tie it all together to do a procedure, it has to be combined with imaging, which is the green circle that you're seeing here, which is kind of what we are going to go through a brief intro of that. And then it also has to be tied with navigation. Think of this as an automated car. So an automated car can drive because it has real-time positioning system, and also it has a real-time mapping system. So that's kind of what all the imaging stuff that you're seeing here, preoperative CT, MR, are already very mature in the imaging world. Where it is really lacking, where there is a lot of work needs to be done, is how can we combine all these imaging technologies to the robotic technologies to make these procedures not even fully automatic, but at least a relatively client-server architecture, or even a master-slave architecture. So I wanted to quickly go through some of these technologies that are already out there. So this is just showing how imaging is moving from 3D to time-resolved or 4D imaging. So these are some examples of aortic dissection that you see that's with time-resolved information. And here you can see we can really track the contrast bolus and see where exactly the contrast is leaking in a patient with stent graft. So we also can go beyond anatomical imaging, where with MRI, you can really image the dynamic septum of an aortic dissection, or we can also get flow information of how you can see the flow patterns are in the main aorta and the false lumen, where you can see the flow, helicity of the flow. So the reason why this is important is when we treat these patients, we don't just look at a stenosis and then treat it. At the end of the day, we are treating a flow in the patient. So that's kind of why I wanted to see how there is a rich amount of data that's already out there, and how that can be combined and taken to the surgical space. So these are some examples of how we can render the CT images from a surgical standpoint, so a surgeon can take this and use it in his operating room. So these are a few other examples. So that's a carotid body tumor that is being rendered that you can see. And these are some other examples of a patient with coarctation of the aorta and a huge coronary artery. The coronary arteries are not supposed to be like this huge like this. And this is a patient who is bleeding from a thoracic aneurysm. So going back to my architecture slide, so all this information that I have shown you are already out there preoperatively. How are we combining them into the intraoperatively is why we are using some of these fusion technologies in the operating room. So what I'm going to demonstrate right now, if you can zoom out a bit, is what I call as a cone beam CT acquisition. So this is getting a 3-dimensional information, like a CT-like picture, in the operating room without moving the patient to the CT scanner. There are also next generation ORs where we have a CT scanner on the rails, and that can slide into the patient without having to do this cone beam CT. So for now, what you're going to see is a cone beam CT acquisition. So I'm going to set it up to show. So right now I'm telling the system we need to do a 3D image of this phantom that you are seeing. So we are going to focus on the aortic arch region. So it's going around the patient. Right now we are not using X-rays. We are just setting it up for the 3D acquisition. So it's just checking for to make sure that there is nothing colliding with the robot. So it is similar in technology to a conventional CT donut that you have seen, except that this only acquires data around 200-degree rotation. So right now it is set up. Maybe if we can walk back to the control room, we can see the acquisition and also see the reconstructed images at the same time. So right now, if you look at the phantom, the CM is going to go around the phantom 200 degrees. And if you, at the same time, after the acquisition, you will see on the 2D fluoroscopic images. So right now, it's capturing multiple X-rays from 200-degree rotation around the patient. And if you see on this monitor, you see the 2D projection images of the 3D data sets. So those 2D projection images are currently being reconstructed into 3D in this monitor. If you can point to this workstation. Yeah. So this is the most recently acquired 3D scan. And as you can see, we have the aortic arch. So what I'm going to do is just focus only on the aortic arch. And now this 3D information has to be matched with a preoperative 3D scan. So the reason why we do that is if you have a patient, so this is like almost like a focused imaging the region of interest, whereas there is a preoperative CT that is already out there that has the whole like chest, abdomen, pelvis. So you will see, so these are two scans that are currently being in the process of co-registration. So the gray or colored image is the most recent one, and the white image is from the preoperative 3D scan. So you can kind of see the way it is rendered. So this is your entire previous CT data set, and this is the intraoperative cone beam data set that is currently being fused. So once this is fused, we would have the roadmap for our intervention today, which is a aortic arch cannulation. So at this point, we could go to the intraoperative cone beam CT that was showing only the arch, or the entire aortic arch and the intrarenal aorta in this particular patient. So what we are going to do now is mark the target zones, which is kind of what we are looking at here. So if you see, these are the three vessels from the arch that I was talking about earlier. So we are going to go into the middle vessel, which is the left carotid artery. And I've already gone ahead and planned the procedure. So these are the two rings. Currently, they are in profile. So these rings are marking the origin of the left carotid artery. And the larger ring is to kind of give you the idea of the optimal angle the CM can be to get to that projection. So now we are set with imaging part. So if you don't mind coming back in so we can do the navigation as well. So before we move in, I would like to introduce my colleague here, Martin. He's our research fellow at Houston Methodist. So he's going to be driving the robot remotely. So currently for the demonstration purpose, he's in the same space. But in theory, he can be 100 miles apart or 1,000 miles apart as long as he has an internet connection. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you are going to drive the robot, Martin?
Yeah, so currently the 4-part GRX system is used, and We are loaded into the robot, and now, if you can see, here is the telerobotic console. It has 3 joysticks. One of them controls the guide catheter, one of them the guide wire, one of them the rapid exchange device that can be loaded if we want to use. It can either be a stent, a balloon, and then I will, during the procedure, I will see the real-time fluoroscopic imaging through this monitor in front of me.
Okay, and he can trigger the X-ray because he is in the same vicinity. He can trigger the X-rays by a wireless foot pedal that we see here. So when we step on fluoro, he gets the real-time picture of the 2D fluoroscopy of the phantom. So let's go back in and see how good Martin is cannulating the carotid artery. Good luck, Martin. Okay, hopefully this is our last switch. Thanks for arranging this orbit. If you can focus on this part of the system. So this is, I would call as a robotic system, but it controls the catheters from the proximal end. So if you look at it, the conventional endovascular cannulation is typically done, most commonly, is typically done with what we call as a triaxial system. So you have a sheath. What you're seeing here is the green is the sheath, and this is the catheter, and you have the wire that goes from the catheter into the vessel, which is kind of, so this is the triaxial system for manual cannulation. And this is kind of what any interventionalist is managing, having to manage the wire, sheath, and a catheter at the same time. So moving to a robot, what it does is it controls, again, the proximal end of the catheter. It holds the sheath and the catheter and the wire. So it accounts for translation movements of the catheters and the sheaths, and also it also does the rotational movement with the wires. So what we are going to see in action is, if I go back to the AP view, so we have leg. So if you see the image, so this is your 2D image, but it also has the green marks. So the green marks are the ones that are coming from the CT data set that was from before. So why we do this? We don't have to inject contrast again and again during the procedure, because the preoperative CT already has the contrast information. Because the C-arm is tracked and the table position is tracked, so you can see the marks are moving as I am moving the C-arm rotation. So right now we are trying to find an optimal view and then try to do the cannulation. So that's probably our optimal view, and we can magnify the image if you would like. And so now I'm not going to touch any of the catheters and wire. Martin, who you saw, our research fellow a few minutes ago, is controlling this robot through an Ethernet-based connection. So go ahead and start the cannulation, Martin. You can show the live fluoro image here. So he's advancing the wire. You can see the wire coming in. So this is all done remotely. And now he's trying to cannulate. So there is a catheter that's already in there. And now I can try to mag out. So what this enables from a futuristic standpoint is you don't have to wear these heavy legs during a procedure, and also this enables providing therapy no matter where you are in the world, as long as you have a hub and spoke model where a specialist could be anywhere in the world and can drive wires and catheters. So for example, in the setting of acute ischemic stroke, we want to make sure all our patients can get expert level care, even if they are in a remote hospital, as long as you have access to a decent imaging system and a robotic system. So this is kind of what we wanted to show, to see how imaging and robotics can come together. What we have not talked, as I go back to the framework that I have put together here, is the navigational part. So we currently do not know yet where the tip of the wire is, except for what we see in the fluoroscopic image. So that can be made so much better if you have sensors in the tip of the catheters, or in the tip of the wires, or optical fibers that run along these wires. So then we don't have to use fluoroscopy. We will get three-dimensional information of these catheters without using fluoroscopy. I think that gives you a quick orientation of our how imaging and robotics come together.
So, okay, thank you, Ponraj.
Any questions?
Yeah, so let me make a comment, because one of the questions in the chat, Ponraj, was not just about what you've shown, but are these robots which we're talking about in current clinical use? And I would say one of the reasons you barely made it to this session was because you were doing exactly what you've demonstrated in terms of image fusion in our operating rooms this morning. So all of these robots are currently clinically being applied.
Sure, like some of the remote interventions that we demonstrated today is not fully commercially available, but you can still control this robot from a local console from within the room or in the control room that is connected to the robot through a cable. Currently, what we demonstrated today is this connection was through the hospital network, and the remote node operator can drive the catheter without actually having to be in the room. So that's kind of what we demonstrated, but most of the technology from an imaging standpoint and the fusion and the guidance standpoint already exists and is being routinely used here on a daily basis, as Dr. Lumsden mentioned.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification. Keep you out of jail for making sure that it's not commercially available, that we can drive these robots remotely. Why don't you comment a little bit on the experiment that was done between Methodist Downtown and the Woodlands?
Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to address is, let me step off the radiation a little bit. Okay, so one of the reasons we did the research study here is we wanted to know what is the acceptable delay, because any network, as you know, when you're sending packets of data from one node to the other node, you're going to have a delay. So what we are trying to address by the remote testing between the main campus and Woodlands is what is the acceptable delay. So what we did is we programmed a delay in the net system with, say, 100 milliseconds, 200, 400, 500 milliseconds, and let the users navigate catheters. In this particular room, it was animal model, but in the case of Woodlands, it was mostly in phantoms and in patients, where we are trying to see what is the acceptable network lag that a user perceives the delay. So that in our experience, for most cardiovascular interventions, it's roughly around 400 milliseconds. And that is almost imperceptible for the user when so the delay is essentially when you're advancing the wire, you want to make sure you are seeing the tip of the wire. You don't want to be advancing like the analogy I can give is the delay with the communication with Mars, right? You don't want to be waiting for 20 minutes until you get the return signal. So here, in the context of remote intervention, we are trying to see what is the ideal delay, and that network delay, and that can definitely get better with our 5Gs, and our network solutions can be much more distributed. And it also is procedural based. You may not need that much temporal sampling if you're doing a peripheral leg intervention as compared to a coronary intervention where things can be moving pretty fast. So it really is clinical procedural specific, but this is one of the projects that our research fellow Martin is working on, and we are trying to see how we take this technology from a benchtop model into real world clinical procedures.
All right. Thanks very much. Going to hand it back to Stuart.
Oh, no problem.
Thanks, Ponraj. And I think what's really interesting here, and this kind of ties in this XR Symposium theme, right, is what you're seeing there is that the robotic operator is slowly but surely getting further and further away from the robot. Okay, they're usually, at the moment they're attached by a big wire. We've done studies where it's a wireless, okay, but the user is still linked to that control system. And that's where XR can come in, okay? You can get rid of that control system by using XR technology, so like a HoloLens system or augmented reality or virtual reality. And that is where we're trying to push this. That's one of the projects we're actively looking at. So Pornraj, thank you very much for your time. And I want to just give a big shout out to everybody at MIRI who's there doing the demos. You know, well done, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again for the opportunity.
Okay, so we're making good time. I think if we're ready to move on to the next session, let's go with that.
Hope they're all right up there.
Just heard a horrible noise coming from the studio. But I think we're good, right? So the next session is robotic health pipeline. And again, robotic health is a term we're actually kind of pioneering here. You know, it's not just robotic assisted surgical procedures, it's how robotics and autonomous technology fits into the whole health pipeline. And this session we're going to look at research and development applications. So what's coming down the pipeline, you know, what's happening in industry, you know, what systems are out there that are trying to get FDA approval, get the CE mark, trying to get into the clinic, but also what's happening in the labs, okay? What's being funded by the government, you know, what are people doing in academic institutes, etc. So our first guest, if we have them on the line, is Jose Manuel Calodas from ABB Robotics, or Chima. Do we have him on the line? I think we're just patching in. Okay, I can see him on Zoom. He's there. I've been emailing him. We're there. I think we're just waiting on the studio to put us through. And just, you know, ABB Robotics, they actually have a center based on the Texas Medical Center Innovation Institute. So they've been here for a number of years, and they're trying to really pull their robotic technology into healthcare. So this is a really unique kind of branch of ABB. And what we're trying to do is, again, pull their technology and pull their engineers in and actually find case studies and case examples to bring their technology in. So whether that's in the operating room, whether that's more supply chain logistics, whether it's like pharmacy, pharmaceuticals, etc. That's what we're actually going to look at. So, you know, over the next kind of 3 to 6 months, I believe we're going to have some ABB engineers on site, and we're going to be helping them just kind of uncover new areas of exploration. Are we good, guys? We good to go? There we go.
Hey, Stuart, how are you doing?
I'm good, Chima. How are you, sir?
Dr. Lusman. How are you doing? Very well. Nice to see you.
So I'll just hand it over to yourself. We'd love to know more about what it is you guys are doing over there at ABB and what your experience has been like so far at the Texas Med Center.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us, Stuart. It's really an honor, and well, it's really an opportunity for us to share what we have been doing. So we have been already 2 years operating from Texas Medical Center, from TNC Innovation building, where we have our global accelerator for ABB Robotics for Healthcare. So we are a large robotic company coming into healthcare, and we have been operating already for 2 years, and we can share today some examples. Where are the areas that we are focusing on, and some of the experience that we had already. So our vision, we will go through it, is really how can industrial robotics support in the current challenges in healthcare. We have more patients, lack of skilled workers, and this is making the availability of care not arriving to patients in many cases. Healthcare is becoming more complex, and we have situations like the one that we have lived during the last 2 years. But not only that, it was already a very clear trend. So we believe that technology can help, and the technology coming from industrial robotics can help. Robotics is evolving very strongly. We have collaborative robots. We have vision systems that are evolving very fast, artificial intelligence, mobile robots, how we are able to combine this technology to support care to patients in the most in the best possible way. And this is what we have been working on from the accelerator here in Houston, and today we want to show you some examples. So we believe also in order to be able to develop those solutions and those applications, we can only do it in collaboration with the experts and the people in the field. And this is working together with the hospitals and working together with the doctors and the nurses, and to understanding how can technology and how can we effectively help. And this is what we have been trying to do. In the last 2 years, we started when we started, we were 2 people here. Today we are 14. It's a very diverse team. It's not only engineers and it's not only robot programmers. We have also biochemists and biomedical engineers, and we really needed to assemble this core team. That is the core team of ABB Robotics for Healthcare. We also needed to understand about the regulatory, and we needed to develop the right process and quality process to be able to deliver solutions and to develop solutions and products. And we have been very strongly working on that, and we can share part of our experience. And we implemented ISO 13485, and we are following good manufacturing procedures, and we are implementing this together with the quality systems that we have in ABB coming from our existing and our previous experience. And we try to do this in the best possible way. And at the same time, we were trying to, and we have been discussing with many players, so medical device manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, and especially focus in Texas Medical Center and hospital like Methodist. So, and this is an iterative process. So learning from the discussion with you, we need to understand what is the team that we need and the process that need to really support healthcare and improve our delivery. We
actually have
in this
a really
process
nice
we have
video here.
I
think just to show the audience a little bit more of the robots you're actually talking about, we've got a great video that we just got off YouTube there. Again, my experience with ABB from the beginning was, you use the technology on almost like car production pipelines, right? So I think let's give the audience a couple of minutes just to see this video. I mean, it's fascinating.
That's exactly right. But the challenge that we find in a hospital is not a car factory. So we are not assembling a car or doing the same work 24 hours, 7 days a week. So, and this is where technology is evolving. So, and what you are seeing here is collaborative robot. So a collaborative robot is a robot that is able to work alongside people. So working together or close to the person and the workers, and in a very flexible way. So it means that it needs to be safe and needs to be extremely flexible because we are not robots.
We were talking about new types of technology. Obviously we went over to your site there, and what was the systems that myself and Homer Quintana were looking at? Can you maybe tell us a bit more about them?
Well, we are working together with you. So and basically, and we will show in the presentation in Hopkins now. We have been very strongly working improving our products and improving our robots. In the way we can improve our robots is really to make them compatible with the environment and ready for the application that needs to be done. So it means that they need to be compatible with the cleaning agents and hygienic procedures that exist in the areas that we are going to work. They need to be connected. And also we are working in developing new applications using mobile robots. But is together with collaborative robots is the new wave of industrial robotics, and we are looking to pilot them in some applications in Methodist.
Okay. Yeah,
and in the applications
I just found that video. Chima, that you sent. I mean, it's a great one here, you guys at TMC Innovation. So, yeah, we're just playing that right now. So again, this shows where you guys are. It shows the lab. You're at TMC Innovation Institute on the campus there. And this is your laboratory assistant robot, right?
Exactly. So here we see some of the applications that we are doing. And we are very much focused in laboratory automation, biotech applications, and also logistics, and working in the supply chains within the hospitals. So we are, and we are trying to develop technology that is going to be assistant technology to the people working in laboratories and working within the supply chains in a hospital.
So Chima, this is Alan Lumsden. We haven't met, but thank you for participating. So from the point of view of what we're trying to do, and that is build a kind of research infrastructure underneath all of these hospital-based robotics platforms. I'm interested in the expertise that you've had to accumulate in order to create this company, and that maybe we've got to duplicate, or, you know, for us to partner with you from a research standpoint, what kind of people do we need to recruit? Is it computational scientists, mechanical engineers, visualization experts, all of the above? What did you have to do in order to build this company?
Well, something that we have learned also from other industries, but here is super important, is that we are not going to be able to solve the problems on our own, also from ABB. So it's really, we need to learn to work together, which is what we are doing, by the way, but also within our team. I was explaining, we have, I think, on the expertise that are very different to other ABB groups, and what is very important, what we are doing here, I would name two. One is the process engineering. So it's very important that we understand very well what is the problem. So it's a biotech process, what needs to be done, what are the challenges, what are the environmental conditions, how the process needs to happen, and then that we connect this to the engineering team. And what we do very often is that we simulate a process. So we create a virtual copy of the solution that needs to be done. And we have a extremely good simulation tool that is called Robot Studio. And we are able to emulate that process. But it's an iterative process. So again, we will need to go back to the process, and how we understood well is something that is missing. Is this going to work? We will build a proof of concept, and we will test the equipment, and we will test the process, but understanding very intimately the process that needs to be done, which is not an engineering problem, but a biotech or a laboratory or a medical process, this is key. So having the right person, also within our team, or the right collaboration is very important. Then connecting to the engineers, this is what we can do and where we can help. And the other part that is extremely important is all the quality and regulatory part. So having the right experts. So it's very important. A robot is not a medical device. A robot is a component, but we need to understand what is the intended use. And in the intended use, we need to understand what is the risk in the process, what is the category level for this, is this a medical device, what is the category level of this medical device, and also what are the safety issues. So a robot can be a collaborative robot, but it's not going to be collaborative if it's managing a scalpel. Yeah. So this needs to be clearly assessed and discussed.
I do apologise, but we're running back on time. But listen, thank you very much for joining us during this live session. For members of the audience that want to learn more about ABB and their robotic healthcare pathway, they will be doing a session, I believe, at 10:20 in Hoppin. So please hop into that session here and find out more. Thank you very much, Chima.
Thank you.
Look forward. Thank you.
So our next company that we're going to be hearing from are CMR Surgical. They actually started their company and their kind of activities from the UK. Now, before we head over to Brad Jones, there's actually a great video that I'm going to play. It's video 3 for the people in the audience, and this gives a really beautiful kind of overview of the system that CMR Surgical have. And again, I need to state it's not currently FDA approved for human use. But let's have a look at that video. Wow, I want one. Okay, Brad, over to you, sir. We'd love to hear more about you.
Stuart, thanks. Really, first of all, thank you guys for having us. I'm Brad Jones. I'm part of the U.S. team. As Stuart mentioned, we're not FDA approved, so there's some things that we can't talk about as we sit today. I think our goal is really just to introduce you guys to CMR Surgical and Versius. I appreciate Stuart playing the video to kind of kick this off. As you can see, we take a little bit different approach, and happy to answer any questions that you have as it relates to that. But to give you a little bit of overview of, as far as who CMR is, we were founded in 2014. Our mission statement has been very clear from the beginning. We want to bring minimal access surgery to more patients. We've been able to do that. We're commercially active in Europe, Australia, portions of South America, Asia, the Middle East, as well as Africa. We've done over 2,000 clinical cases thus far across multiple specialties. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have today. So
what is next in the pipeline for you guys? You're saying you're not FDA approved yet, and I know you're limited to what you can discuss, but how does a company actually go about trying to get FDA approval for a system such as the Versius system that you have?
Well, I mean, we're in process. That's really all I can say as far as where we are with the FDA. I think what comes next, since our founding, we've really put most of our bandwidth into developing the robot. I think moving forward, you'll see that bandwidth shift to focus more on advanced instrumentation and future technologies. We're really excited about where we're at and the future that we have in store.
So, can you tell me a bit more about the origins of this technology? Like, it started in the UK, right? And I believe you have a CE mark for the UK, correct? In Europe, I guess. So what kind of procedures, tell us a little bit more about that, like the origins of the technology.
Sure. Well, it started in the UK. We really wanted to make a robot that was economically viable for the NHS, being a UK company. We got our CE mark, and we started doing clinical cases, first in colorectal, and we've since expanded to general surgery, thoracic, OBGYN, and continue to expand to other indications in the future. I think that we've sold 7 systems to the NHS to date, which is a big accomplishment. That was a big part of what we wanted to do, was to create a system that would work within that market, and we've done that. We are also expanding into other markets that really had not had a lot of robotic technology historically. I would say our largest group of robots thus far that we've sold have been to India to date, and we've got a lot of data and technology coming out of there as well. So,
and tell me about the company. I was really interested to find your CEO, Per Vigard Nerseth. He actually spent time at Stirling University, right?
He did. Yeah, he did. He also worked with ABB, who was the presenter before us. So it's kind of a small robotic world.
That's correct. Just for the one, that's actually where I'm from in Scotland, Stirling. So it was really interesting. Dr. Lumsden.
Yeah, so one of the questions actually is about what procedures have you done with the robot? And can you say a little bit about the disposables and the cost associated with that?
Yeah, I can't, because of where we are with the FDA, I can't get into costs associated with the disposables. However, as far as the cases that we've done, they've been across the board in general surgery, GYN, colorectal, urology. We're doing cholecystectomies, hernias, hysterectomies, benign GYN, as well as some Uragon procedures to date.
All right.
So yeah, well, thank you very much for your participation. Again, for members of the audience, CMR Surgical will be running a hop-in session at 10:30, I believe the time is. So if you want to learn a little bit more, go over and see Brad, or I think John Acker might be in there as well. But thank you, Brad. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, so on to our next company. Now this is actually a company introduced to me by Homer Quintana. So he runs the Center for Device Translation, the Center for Rapid Device Translation here at Houston Methodist. And this company is from Switzerland, okay? They're called AOT. And before we go to the Zoom, I've actually got a little video that I'm going to play off my computer. So if the guys in the studio could just link up my computer. We're actually going to show you a little bit of footage that we recorded on site here at Houston Methodist of the robot in action. So again, I've just been told there's no audio here, but you know, Tobias is going to give a further explanation. But again, you know, they're using this cold ablation laser process to cut with a great precision, accuracy into the jawbone structure. I mean, you can see that's like a puzzle piece. Okay, so already you're providing exceptional amount of support and stability before this thing's even healed. So let's cut over to Tobias Wilken. He is live. He may actually be in Switzerland. I'll let him tell that. But Tobias, pleasure to have you on the show.
Yes, hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Coming in loud and clear.
Perfect. So yes, welcome from Switzerland. Thank you very much for inviting us for the symposium.
Okay, so we'd love to know a little bit more about the AOT and the Carlo robot that you have standing next to you. I mean, it looks fascinating.
Yes, we've prepared a little demo for you or for later in the session. And before I would, however, do the live demo, I prepared a few slides to talk about AOT and our mission, if that's good for you.
That is perfect. Yeah, please proceed.
Then I would quickly share my screen. I hope you can see it all now.
Yes.
Yes, fantastic. So yes, I'm Tobias Wilken from AOT. We're a young startup from Switzerland, and that's where I am standing at the moment. And our mission is to improve bone surgery and osteotomy by using light instead of metal, so using a laser for cutting. So until now, osteotomies have been performed with power tools as you know them, or recently also with robotic instruments, but they are robotic assisted, not autonomous in that sense, or fully digital. And still there are clinical needs and safety concerns that remain unaddressed at the moment. And our mission is to improve bone surgery and osteotomy. Oh, I have a bad feedback on this line. Light instead of metal, so using a laser for cutting. So until now, oh, wait, I have bad audio problems here. I tried to change my audio. As you know them.
Stuart, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I think it stopped for a minute there, but I can hear you now, and we can see you moving around on your camera.
So you can hear me, perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so our mission is to reinvent bone surgery and digitize it by using a laser. And this laser with a particular property that it has cold ablation and remains the bone thermally unaffected. We want to improve outcomes, potentially also reduce operation time and complex procedures, and pave the way for truly autonomous robotic surgery with our device. So here you see it in a marketing slide. It's called Carlo. Carlo stands for Cold Ablation Robot Guided Laser Osteotome, and it's exactly in the name what it does. And here you see the overview of the whole system. So we have a laser head, which is our proprietary technology mounted on a robotic arm. And the whole thing is controlled by surgical navigation and our own software. So the software, together with the pre-planning, full digital workflow, that is our core competence, together with the optics. And then we use other standard components to develop a complete system. So let me briefly just introduce what our principle of operation is. So we use pulsed light at a special wavelength that predominantly heats up water. And when we focus that on bone, we create a tiny micro explosion that fractures the tissue, rips it apart, and ejects the tissue together with a heated up water vapor. And by doing that, we leave the cut surface actually cold, colder than with traditional mechanical instruments even. And with one pulse, we of course create only a tiny hole, but then by applying many pulses next to each other and then on top of each other, we create a cut line and cut through the bone into the depth that we want to reach, and have a nice and clean and especially precise cut, because that all is controlled fully autonomously by our software via the surgical navigation. Here you see a scanning electron microscopy image of the cut surface in a comparison between our laser at the top and a traditional piezo instrument, for example. Other mechanical instruments look alike. So you clearly see the difference between the surface that we create and a traditional instrument which pushes the debris into the tissue. So with us, we have, with our laser, we have an open and porous surface that is biologically active immediately after cutting. It is starting to bleed immediately and starting to heal immediately. We have preclinical data that demonstrate that healing kicks in faster with our device in comparison to traditional mechanical instruments. And here you see already the same video that you've been showing. Fantastic, thank you for that. So I can speak a little bit to this video. So with the laser and with a pre-planned osteotomist that we can translate autonomously into the OR, we have the ability to create new cut geometries, like, for example, such puzzle pieces that carry a function intrinsically. They can be load-bearing, like in this case, or they can be new trajectories that will not bend, because the instrument doesn't bend, it's cutting with light. So we can cut new trajectories. So we have uncharted opportunities, as I called it. So really novel methods of doing bone surgery become possible, and potentially we can reduce the plating that is required afterwards, or go to biologically or bioresorbable materials that that will resorb after time and that are less stable intrinsically. But if we carry the load with our cut, that might be sufficient in the future. So our vision is to potentially improve the implant survival rate, reduce the number of reoperations necessary, and so on. Especially in complex cases, also such really complicated osteotomies where precision matters can even be done faster with a laser because you get them first time right. So those are potential advantages regarding the precision that we have and the functional cuts. More to the precision, I mean, for example, in these experiments that we did already in the neurosurgery up there for electrode placements, we can see that when we come to critical structures, we really keep the precision because we cut with light, we cut without bending, and this can make a huge difference for the safety, for example. We can do deformity corrections with exactly the right angle that was pre-planned, or the load-bearing geometries I've been mentioning already before. And in the end, we also have safety advantages. So we cut vibration and force-free with our light in contrast to mechanical instruments. So delicate cut structures, like, for example, in the cervical spine, can be cut more precisely. Or, for example, the periost, when you do autografts, we can protect this periost better, or we can have less impact on it. We can preserve it better so that it grows back together better. We cut straight, as I said, so we have no bending, no skiving. Even under large angles, our trajectory is the pre-planned trajectory. And with that, we think that we can make robotics even safer than it is today, uniquely safe. You see here a short video clip of our tolerance towards patient movement, for example. Imagine doing that with a mechanical instrument. For us, it is just detection of the navigation system that the patient has moved. And if it has moved, our robot follows and keeps the trajectory and just keeps cutting at the exact site where it's been leaving off. This is not only theory, we are live by now. We have done a first-in-man study last year, ending last year, 28 patients, 3 centers, very successfully. And with this data, we could get in Europe the clearance for market approval, and we have sold our first system to Munich, and by now 25 patients have been treated successfully with Carlo with this first device sold, and we are building up traction and selling more and more systems into the field in future. So we are on the market in Europe, and we are targeting to come to the US market soon. Just as a glimpse for the future, so today, this is our first step as we are next generation osteotome with digital pre-planning, precise cutting, some basic navigation and imaging. But actually, we really think big. We want to become a really omni-tool, a tool that is used throughout the OR, much more than just for osteotomies. I mean, that's our long-term perspective. We are a startup, and that's our vision for the future.
So Tobias, that was absolutely fascinating. I really do appreciate you coming on the show and give us an overview. And please, members of the audience that are interested in learning more, go to the Hopin session where you're going to hear a lot more detail and you can ask questions and answers. Going straight into our next talk, it's Mimic Innovative Surgery, and it's Dr. Jean Bakeland, and we actually pre-recorded this last weekend. So let's have a look at that. Okay, and now for my next guest, I'm pleased to announce we have Dr. Jan Bakeland, who I believe is patching in from Belgium today to give us an overview of the Hominis surgical system. Jan, it's a pleasure to have you here on the show. And I think before we get into talking about this technology, there's a really good video that has been provided by Mimic Med. So if we could play that video, I think that would set the scene very well.
It began as a vision. A new kind of robotic surgical system that could go places and do things beyond the reach of others. Now, that vision has been realized. This is Hominis from Mimic, robotic surgery made natural.
Transforming an innovative technological concept into a working system led us on a fascinating journey along the frontiers of robotic surgery. We are gearing up for serial production, preparing to share our achievements with the world.
With great surgical and ergonomic capabilities, Hominis takes robotic surgery a quantum leap forward. Its miniature humanoid arms mimic human dexterity, providing outstanding rotation, articulation, and maneuverability that surpass human capabilities, breaking through anatomical barriers. Hominis can handle a wide range of surgical procedures. Its initial focus is on minimally invasive gynecological procedures. While the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists clearly prefers the use of transvaginal gynecological procedures, they are currently limited to just 20% of the hysterectomies performed in the U.S. Hominis promises to change this. With its arms fully retroflexed, viewing the uterus from the top, it makes the transvaginal approach immediately familiar to gynecological surgeons. The Hominis surgical system enables the preferred vaginal approach, associated with fewer complications, shorter surgical and recovery times. This is a major medical breakthrough, protected by 198 international patents, and with a potential multi-billion-dollar market. It comes from one of the pioneers of minimally invasive and robotic surgery.
Mimic is thinking about robotic technology very differently. With its unique approach, the Hominis system is going to have the capabilities of introducing new types of minimally invasive approaches, such as transvaginal procedures. This is a true game changer in the field of minimally invasive robotic technology.
Join us on a journey into the future of robotic surgery. Hominis from Mimic.
Well, fantastic. Okay, so I think both myself and the audience are really eager to learn a little bit more. So, so first of all, tell us about yourself. Like who are you? Like, where are you? And what was your involvement from the beginning with this system?
Hi, Stuart. Thank you for having me. So I'm based in Belgium. I'm working in a hospital in Bonn, which is just north of Brussels, right in the heart of Europe. I work as a gynecologic oncologist and minimally invasive surgeon. My research is mainly focused on reducing the invasiveness of surgery and on bringing the hysterectomy techniques back to the vaginal route and trying to broaden indications for vaginal surgery. So I work in a medium-sized hospital in Belgium, and I'm affiliated with the University of Leuven. I was not involved in the development of the Hominis robot at all. I was approached by the people from MIMIC, I think through the research that I'd done on reducing the invasiveness of hysterectomy and on the introduction of V-nodes. And they introduced me the system right before they were about to start clinical trials. And I was very intrigued by the concept, the idea that they had so early, because we were at that stage working on introducing transvaginal endoscopic surgery, and they'd obviously had the vision before that already to combine that with the advantages of robotic surgery. So they introduced me to the system, and I practiced on the system, and I was very pleased with it. And then we started conducting the first two clinical trials that were geared to get FDA approval for the Hominis system, to introduce it in the United States and to later use to get CE approval as well. So we conducted two clinical trials, one on hysterectomy and one on adnexectomy. So hysterectomy for the removal of the uterus for benign indications for non-cancer patients. The study was conducted in 3 centers, in Belgium, the hospital where I work, in Israel, and in a hospital in Prague, and Czech Republic. And we did in the 3 centers with different surgeons. We did a number of hysterectomy cases, and in the second trial, we removed a number of ovaries. So for benign ovarian pathology, we did adnexal surgery. And the results of those trials led to the de novo FDA approval of the system, and it's now been introduced in the United States based of that approval.
Superb. So, if you don't mind me asking, when did it get full FDA approval? Was it recently?
Yes, it was early this year. Yep.
Oh wow, fantastic. Do you have any sites lined up? Do you have anything down the pipeline for getting this in the hands of clinicians?
I must say I'm not involved in that. I'm not involved in the sales process in the United States. I'm based in Belgium, and I focus on the research, so I actually don't have an answer to that question.
Got
I'm sure
it.
the people from MIMIC will let you know.
But I guess for members in the audience that want to know a little bit more information, there is actually a session booth and an expo booth that can provide more information on that aspect, where you can ask emails if you're interested in using the system. So you said before they approached you and you became interested in the technology. I'm really curious, what was it about the technology that really piqued your interest?
Well, I think I'm used to working with the current robotic systems. I work on a Da Vinci Xi, which is a system that's developed to do all sorts of surgery, all sorts of different procedures, with actually straight stick instruments that have a wrist that moves. So it's like performing laparoscopy with a robotic control. Now, the MIMIC system was developed very differently. It was used to mimic an entire human arm that is placed in the abdominal cavity through a minimally invasive approach, not through the abdominal wall, but through a natural body orifice, through the vagina, where the approach is less invasive. And it's got a shoulder, elbow, and a wrist joint. So it has a 360-degree reach in each arm. And with that, you can reach any part of the abdomen through a small transvaginal approach. Both arms also are multifunctional, so you don't have to change the instruments during the procedure. You can have, with each instrument, you can have monopolar, bipolar coagulation, you have grasping power, you have cutting power. So you never have to change the instruments during the actual case. So I think this is a robot that was really developed for a specific axis, whereas in the past, robots were made to cover all sorts of procedures. We're seeing an evolution now into the development of robots that were really specifically designed for a specific approach. And that idea of being exactly what I had been working on is having a less invasive transvaginal approach and widening the indications for that.
Fantastic. And I guess my last question would be, given your experience clinically with this system and seeing the outcomes and whatnot, can you see this being used for other kind of applications?
Yes, for sure. I mean, we did the clinical trials just on hysterectomy and appendectomy, and that's what we have evidence for now, and where we saw very good outcomes and very quick patient recoveries and no complication rates in the trials. But obviously, using this transvaginal axis, the arms are so flexible and have such a great reach that you can reach any part of the abdomen. So for sure, the indications will get broadened, and there's no reason why you can start doing other intra-abdominal procedures, operating on a gallbladder or a hernia, or doing bowel surgery, or any other intra-abdominal indication, and probably even use the robot system through other natural body orifices. But at the moment, I think the evidence we have from the trials are for hysterectomy and appendectomy alone.
Understood. Well, listen, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for appearing on the inaugural Houston Methodist Institute for Robotics Imaging and Navigation Symposium. For the members of the audience that again are interested in learning more about the system, I believe MimicMed have an expo booth where they have a really nice presentation there on some of the more details and granularity of the studies, and I believe there's also a session booth as well where you can actually interact with members of the team. So thank you very much, Jan.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you for having me.
So before we continue into more of the academic research part of the program, I'd like for Dr. Lumsden to maybe talk a little bit about the vision of the Institute, where we're going.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. So I've been involved in catheter robotics. I was the national PI for the Hansen Magellan robot that was approved for peripheral use. But I've always been interested in this interaction with imaging, and I was invited to talk about medical robotics at the Hamlin Institute of the Imperial College in London. And so it's an institute for medical robotics, but it's tied directly basically to the hospital that's adjacent to it. And really that seemed incredibly powerful. It's probably the best example of what we want to do that exists in the world. And so there are many areas that they focus on. Imaging is one, robotics, visualization. Visualization we're going to talk a little bit more about later. But it's this idea of bringing together the academic research infrastructure around robotics, because we think that's what's going to attract companies to us, is the ability to interact with the imaging, number one, and number two, the kind of experts that we've showcased this morning. So that's the direction that we're going in. However, this concept really is less than a year old. This is the kickoff meeting, and we're really looking for people who are going to interact with us and try and further this vision. The other novel thing that we do, of course, is, and I think we're looking at these mugs that are sitting here, and it's got that great logo of a heart made out of a pipeline with a rocket ship blowing through it. And that is this meeting we run here called Pumps and Pipes, where we're trying to look at the interface, in our case the cardiovascular world, between what an oil and gas engineer does. I remember Bill Klein, who started Pumps and Pipes with me, said that he works through long, thin tubes, and that he's in the flow assurance business. I said, no, you don't. We work through long, thin tubes, but ours is only 2 or 3 feet long versus 2 or 3 miles long. And I would argue that we're more in the flow assurance business than an oil and gas engineer. But it's the same concepts of imaging And the robotic capability is remarkable. And the example that Stuart is showing at the moment is the NASA robot. We used to live outside the space station. We sat it down during pumps and pipes on an intuitive robot. So we got a robot running a robot. But in town here, there's tremendous expertise both at NASA and in the oil and gas industries and in medicine. And Pumps and Pipes tries to bring these things together. And we really want to get the engineers who are working on robotic systems from these energy companies and from NASA engaged with us here at Methodist. So that's the vision of where we're trying to go. What we fundamentally believe it's the imaging capability because of the partnership we have with Siemens that will differentiate us from what other places are doing. So in a nutshell, that's the vision.
Fantastic. So let's get a little glimpse as to what is happening nation and internationally wide regards to research and academic programs. I'm absolutely delighted to have Dr. Gregory Fisher on the line here, is representing us from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And I spoke with Dr. Fisher there a few weeks ago, and I was absolutely blown away by what they're working on. And so, Dr. Fisher, how you doing, sir?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, and there's been a lot of very, very interesting talks so far. And what I wanted to talk to everybody about today was, some of our research work that we're doing on trying to bring imaging and essentially trying to close the loop on these image-guided interventions where we can have live imaging during our procedures. And most of the focus we've been doing so far is trying to use MRI-guided interventions. So let me just bring up some slides that I have here. Let's see. All right, is that coming up okay?
Looks good.
Excellent. So I'm just going to try to quickly go through this because I have a lot of really interesting pictures and a couple of videos, and happy to answer any questions that come up as we go along here. So just to give you a quick disclosure, I'm affiliated with AIM Medical Robotics. This is a company that's trying to commercialize this technology on MRI-guided interventions, primarily focused in neurosurgery applications, and has licensed a lot of this technology from my university. So my research group has work in a lot of different areas, but primarily we're focused on MRI-guided interventions and then trying to do research with things like the Da Vinci surgical system. And we're using this as a model, but actually all the work that we're doing is really translatable to different types of robotic-assisted surgery devices. And we've been working on developing this community now of about 35 sites around the world that have shared common hardware and software with the Da Vinci, working on autonomy and haptics and all sorts of other research areas. And then we have our hands in a few other areas of healthcare robotics, including socially assistive technologies, wearable devices, and biofabrication. But what I really wanted to focus on today was this MRI-guided research. This is primarily funded through the NIH on multiple different grants that we have. And the ultimate goal is, how can we leverage the high-quality, interactively updated images we get from an MRI scanner, couple that to the precision and the other capabilities that we get from a robotic system, and do precision cancer diagnosis and therapy, as well as a few other applications we can do with these devices. What makes this possible? We have special actuators, we have special robotic system designs, we need special materials, we have new control systems we developed, and then the appropriate surgical planning and actually system integration as well. So there's a lot of challenges to making this actually work effectively. And the two goals that we've been focused primarily on are prostate biopsy, and this is a collaborative effort with the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston and Johns Hopkins University, where we're trying to do precision prostate biopsies and ultimately also brachytherapy, seed delivery, and potentially ablation. And then we also have a project with GE, Albany Med, UMass Medical School, and Acoustic Med Systems on doing conformal ablation, which is essentially using live MR thermal imaging to guarantee we can actually burn the appropriate tumor shape inside of the brain during live imaging with a robot to assist with the actual placement and motion of this probe. So why MRI? Without going through all the details, the real goal is we want intraoperative real-time updates with a robot inside the scanner with the patient while we're performing intervention. We can get high-resolution imaging, we can get high soft tissue contrast, and one of the things that's very interesting for us is we can also get things like temperature measurements. So we can get live dosimetry of thermal dose for ablation. And of course, we can also control scan geometry so we can make sure we're taking images in exactly the orientation that we want while we're doing these interventions. Everybody here is interested in robotics, so I'm not going to echo the things that have been said already, but really our goal is how can we leverage the advantages of robotics, but using them with intraoperative imaging, intraoperative 3D soft tissue imaging from an MRI scanner. So we've already performed clinical trials actually with this prostate robot that I mentioned before. So this is over at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in the Amigo suite. I think it's actually pretty similar to some of the things that might be up in your area as well, where we have an MRI system that's actually in an operating room. But the whole advantage of our robot is we actually don't need to take advantage of that, and we can work in any diagnostic MR system actually. So this is the robot. We're not talking about, large, essentially full room installed robots. These are custom application specific robots that can go from being stored in a closet to be performing an intervention on a patient in under a half an hour, which we found is less time than it took to get the patient prepped in most scenarios. So here we're taking the system, putting it in the MRI scanner, and actually performing biopsies based on the imaging. Now, on top of that, and this is what our more recent NIH funding is how can we take this system that was already used in 30-patient clinical trial and actually add additional features? So what I'm trying to show here is how can we track the needle, track the target, steer or adapt. I like to call it active compensation rather than steering for our purposes, and take this needle and get it to the target, even if there is tissue motion or deflection of the needle. Because one of the limiting factors we had was you can get a couple millimeters of error just due to tissue deformation, for example. So what we've implemented is this cooperative robot, and we heard about that earlier in some other applications, where the physician is in complete control of the insertion. So they're controlling the speed essentially by how hard they push on the system. And then the rotation of this essentially is an automated lane following system where we can steer the needle and the doctor doesn't have to think about it. It's automatically going to adjust its trajectory as they're controlling the insertion depth. To make this all happen, we developed custom control electronics, and I'll dig into this more in the hop-in section a little bit later. We've also done work on developing our own motors. This is actually some finite element modeling and then the holography that we performed on piezoelectric actuators. So we're doing everything from the ground up of developing our own actuators, our own control systems, again, specialized control algorithms, system integration to make this all work. And then we're tying it into this brain cancer application. And this is primarily where we're working with AIM Surgical Robotics to take this from what we developed in the lab and bring this to market and actually try to commercialize the system for both brain cancer ablation. And then also we can use this for DBS lead placement. We can use it for biopsy. We can use it for stereo EEG and also injection of things like gene therapy, for example. So the whole point is to have this precision placement of instruments. And I'm going to skip ahead since we have a lot to show here, but really what I wanted to get at is that we can actually create models of the ablation. We can watch these happen in our simulation and then actually have it happen in real time and monitoring it with MRTI, so the MR thermal imaging. And once you have that, then we can develop closed loop controllers. And what we're trying to show here is that we actually created a learning system that can create a trajectory plan, if you will, to try to burn the entire lesion. So that's about what I wanted to get to today, and I'm going to dig into a lot more detail about this when we get into the hop-in session afterwards.
Dr. Feshler, that is absolutely fantastic. I mean, I'm really looking forward to hear more in your session there. Thank you very much, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on the list we have Dr. Jason Moore from Penn State University. And just so our speakers know, we actually have a little bell here. If you hear the bell, it means you've got 30 seconds left. So, Dr. Moore, over to you.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, all right, wonderful. Yeah, so my name is Jason Moore. I'm from Penn State University. I'm a professor here in mechanical engineering. In my talk, in the hop-in session, I'll go into more detail about this, but give kind of a brief overview here. Just about a program that we've been working on in order to develop a robotics system to improve medical training. And so this, just as a disclosure, I work with huge group of people, both myself, Scarlett Miller, fellow PI, a number of doctors at Hershey Medical Center and Cedars-Sinai Medical Center as well, and that we have equity in the company Medulate that may have interest in this technology, but currently resides here at Penn State. And so a little bit, I'm going to go into some about medical education. This idea of simulation has been growing really over the last 20, 30 years and become more and more popular. This idea that we can try to train people to be more effective, more efficient at the different medical procedures that they perform. And through an NIH grant now for the last 7 years or so, we've been working on the procedure of central venous catheterization. So this is a very commonly performed procedure. There's about 5 million or so performed in the United States each year, and it's used to really monitor critically ill patients. And very useful. It's also a procedure that is commonly taught to medical residents fairly long in their medical residency. And so here we have an example. It's considered somewhat of a complex bimanual task where you have one hand that actually holds the ultrasound probe. You have another hand that goes in with the needle. Right now, the person's looking, they're trying to identify which one's the vein, which one's the artery. Then they're eventually going to pick up the needle, the syringe, and actually guide that in about 40 degrees while aspirating, while pulling the syringe backwards to actually target this vein and not hit the artery, and very carefully place that into position. And this is generally a very safe procedure. However, there have been known to be some serious complications that can sometimes occur, especially with users that are a little less proficient, a little less used to performing this procedure. And so to address this challenge, we've worked and developed a system that we call the dynamic haptic robotic training. So a picture of it is shown right there on the right. And basically, this is a training setup where we go in for the medical residency programs every summer, and we have a number of people go through. They train with the system, and the system has them go through a series of scenarios. They get some good feedback and become more and more proficient as it goes along. And so just kind of a brief overview of how this works. We tried to make it very identical to the actual procedure in a number of ways, providing a virtual ultrasound screen, a mock ultrasound probe, and a haptic robot that the user interacts with. And then the haptic robot's nice because that provides the realistic force feedback that the user would actually experience doing this on a real patient. And then we have a program software that we're continuously evolving and improving. And the software works to apply a very unique patient scenario for each time the person does this. It allows for very quantitative performance to be assessed, and then it provides a very guided feedback so that the medical resident can further improve their learning and gradually improve their skills. And so we've done a number of studies on this. This is just one brief one. I'll go over some others in the hop-in session. But this shows a little bit about, from training, starting on day 1, moving up towards day 3 here, and how, over time, people can gain more skills, can become more and more proficient working with the system. And also this standard deviation, gradually decreases, so the entire group of medical residents gradually increases to this higher level where we want them to be at. And so, as I mentioned, we train this every summer. We trained over 120 new medical residents this past summer, both at Cedars-Sinai and Hershey. And that's all I have. And I'm really excited to dive into this much more in the hop-in session. And I welcome all kinds of questions and discussion in there.
Thank you very much.
That was excellent. So again, next on the list from Vanderbilt University, we have Dr. Robert Webster. There we go.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Glad to be here. Really interesting conference. And I'm going to tell you, so I am also a faculty member. I'm at Vanderbilt University. I run a large surgical robotics lab with lots of projects. I want to zoom in on just one of those though today and tell you about Virtuoso Surgical, which is a startup company that we spun out of my lab about 5 years ago now. And our goal at Virtuoso is really to do for endoscopy what the Da Vinci robot did for laparoscopy. Disclosures, I'm president of Virtuoso. We have a second startup called Endothea, which I'll mention briefly in the hop-in session after, but I'm president of both of those, so disclosures up front. So what is the problem we're trying to solve? Well, endoscopes, as you guys know, rigid endoscopes are metal tubes, and through them is a port that you introduce instruments. And then the surgeon holds on at the back end of that instrument with a pistol grip like what's shown on the left. The challenge is those instruments cannot move laterally with respect to the endoscope. They can only go in and out and twist. So that can be an issue. So picture yourself doing neurosurgery with an endoscope like this. You go all the way down into the ventricles through a burr hole, and now you've got your scissors through that port, and you're trying to make this horizontal cut through this membrane in the brain. and you know there's pulsating blood vessels right next to you, and you're like, gosh, how do I even move my scissors? The only way I can do it is to tilt the whole endoscope, and I'm compressing brain tissue when I do that. So I really want to be conservative about how far and how much pressure I put on that brain tissue so we don't have complications. So it's really hard. How would you do a complex dexterous surgery with a device like this in the middle of the brain? So that's the problem we're solving. The solution, sort of the magic solution that lets us do something that's so small, because these endoscopes are very tiny, and yet give the surgeon 2 little manipulators, is this idea of a concentric tube robot. So this robot I'm showing you here is made from 3 super elastic tubes. They're stuck inside one another, and each one has a curved tip. And so when you grab onto the back end of this device, each one of the tubes, and you apply twisting and telescopic extension motions, you get something that is literally the size of a needle, yet it can bend and elongate conceptually like a tentacle does. So what we do at Virtue, oh, and by the way, it's 10 times smaller than a standard Da Vinci tool. So very, very tiny. So what we do is we stuff 2 of these through the port in a standard endoscope. So this is a standard 8.6 millimeter diameter endoscope, and we can put 2 of these manipulators through the port. And what does that look like for the surgeon? Well, here's an example. You can see the surgeon's hands, and this surgeon is manipulating this simulated polyp lesion, trying to cut it out. And you can see the endoscope view is not moving at all. The endoscope's in one position, and she has 2 hands, and she can retract with one of them and then move her cutting tool very dexterously to make the cuts that she wants to make. And one particular maneuver that could just never be done before, so she's cut on one side of this lesion, and now she's going to flip it over and cut on the other side. And picture, how would you even do this with just a single finger that can only move in and out, and you're sort of poking and prodding at your lesion? There would just be absolutely no way to do a maneuver like this with a standard rigid endoscope. So here's what the system looks like that we're building. It has a little motorized unit on the end of it that attaches to the endoscope, supported by a robot arm, and then there's a surgeon console that you saw in the previous video. So that's the idea of what it looks like. Here's what it looks like in our lab. This is Dr. Harrell, who's my co-founder, a urologic surgeon. He's cutting out the lobe of a simulated prostate here. And you can see he went over and repositioned the endoscope. So the great thing about this is the surgeon still has control over where that endoscope is moving. And in addition to that, has these 2 hands that can go and cut and retract for you. And then to show you one more view of this, which I'll try and mute this music. This shows you 3 different views of the same kind of procedure. So you can see, really zoom in on, see the surgeon's hands, how they're moving. You can see what the endoscope view looks like. And you can see our system with the robot arm supporting this motorized unit, and then the endoscope on the end of it. So just to finish up, in the hop-in session, I'll go over a little bit more about, why is it that we think this has huge potential? And it's because there's randomized controlled trials showing that there's a certain surgical procedure that's better for patients, but it's only done about 4% of the time. And we can enable that to get out to the masses. And I'll tell you all about that. It's called HOLEP, if you're familiar with that. Our first clinical applications are in the bladder and prostate. And then beyond that, we can go to all the areas of the body where rigid endoscopes are used. So I'll tell you about that, and then I'll give you a quick hint about our second startup, which is for flexible endoscopy as well, in the hop-in session, if you want to join me there. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Again, to the audience, if you want to know more about, the work that's been done here, as well as, link up via email or websites, please go to the hop-in session. All that information is there.
And I think we're going to have links to all the different companies' websites.
Correct.
And all of this will be posted on YouTube channels once it's completed. So you
absolutely
have
correct.
to
So to finish off the session, we have Houston Methodist Owen Stephen Wong, who will actually be here representing the Brain Institute. Dr. Wong, over to you, sir.
Okay, can you see me now?
Coming in clear.
Okay, good. I'd like to share a couple of slides. I have 5 minutes, right?
Yes.
So share the slides. Share the screen. I hope you see it.
Uh-huh.
Is it okay? You see the presentation view, or which view you are seeing?
It looks good. Just please proceed.
Okay, so today I talk about stroke, but before that, I'd like to mention a little bit why is the motivation. We know that I want to take a different perspective, okay? For the healthcare market right now, we under a lot of pressure. There are 3 pressure points, right? You have high cost, low quality, as we know. in the United States compared to other developed countries. And government in the macroeconomic scale, government has a lot of policy, all these things to make it try to make it right. And at the same time, socioeconomically, we have a lot of public health equity issue, patient right, all the issue. All these are really forcing healthcare right now today. We have such a change. What is automation? We're talking about how to reduce costs, all these things. And I just want to mention this. JAMA has published a couple of papers on this. Actually, more or less the healthcare waste cost United States about close to $1 billion. It's about 30% of cost. So this is an issue that the cost is, of course, some of them is related to back office. Some of them are non-transparency in pricing, but some of them is really related to medical care, wrong diagnosis, misdiagnosis, wrong treatment. So our lab actually asking a question is, can we use artificial intelligence to reduce waste, fraud, and cost, at the same time maintain or even improve the clinical care? This is the question we're asking. And today I'd like to share with multiple projects. One of the projects we'd like to share today is about what we've done on acute stroke. We know this is one of the major causes. It's 800,000 cases, the leading cause in United States. 80% actually stroke are ischemic stroke in United States. And you go to ER room, go stroke call, the tendency, we overcall 30% just in case. And we actually also miss 20%, pretty much like roughly half the call are wrong in ER room. You go to ER room today. So, and the point is a stroke is very different from disease like Alzheimer. Alzheimer has no drugs, so he diagnoses it, so what? But stroke is really, we have a lot of treatment, all different form of treatment. We just don't know when we start treating the patients or even prevent the patient have a stroke. So time is brain. And we'll talk about this stroke in ER room, but reality is, it's really a tip of iceberg. Suspended stroke is 800,000 cases per year. And you go to the ER room, I will mention about the chance is pretty bad in terms of 1/3 comprehension system. And about 5 to 10% from estimated. Really, actually, we have a lot of huge silent missed stroke in the cases. And the question is really, can we even catch this patient, move them into suspected stroke, and in fact, move into something we can do treatment. And this is the whole idea is, can we leverage the AI technology right now today to really recognize the stroke earlier and deliver the right treatment to the patient at the right time? So today, I just want to talk about two things in my talk. First, one thing we call the CD delousing on the edge. And the other one, we call it the Deep Stroke app. And these are the two solutions I think will help achieve one of our goals. And that's all I have. Thank you. All right. Any questions? Very strict.
Really fascinating.
Hello.
I really do appreciate that. And again, for members of our audience, Dr. Wong is actually going to be talking a little bit more about his research in the Hopin session. So we're making really good time. To close out the final session, session 3, this is directly related to the work we've been doing for our newly established Centre for Surgical Extended Reality, or what we are kind of unofficially calling MIRIN XR. And the first company I'm pleased to bring on board is Fundamental Surgery. And we have the CEO, Chris Scaragood here, who's going to give us a little bit of an overview about what it is they do. Chris, are you there, sir?
I am. Hi, guys. How are you doing? Thank you very much for having me. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Loud and clear.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. Come on. I'm just going to give you a real quick overview of what I'll be talking about in my Hopin session. So what we wanted to do today was to talk about how we can help robotic assisted surgical device companies to really accelerate safely their approach to market, and how surgeons can adopt their technology and make the best use of it for their patient. So as a company, we have been working in VR and specifically focused on surgical training for around 6 years now. We can incorporate haptics within our VR, and importantly for us, we have this accreditation from the Royal College of Surgeons in the UK. I believe we're the only VR company that is accredited as a surgical education centre. We work closely with the Royal College. We're accredited by the Academy of Orthopaedic Surgeons, and we work with our investors who are Mayo Clinic and include Sana Clinic and a number of others to develop our simulations. And we work with customers that you can see on the right-hand side here. So that's a bit about us. There's really a spectrum of use cases that VR can really assist with what the robotics companies are doing, whether that's in sales and marketing, or in the surgical team or the surgeon rehearsal, or in terms of using it to really help on the internal technical work as well. The reason for that is there's a number of problems that VR can solve. There are interesting issues around logistics of shipping a robot to show it to somebody, especially at the moment where there's limited face-to-face access. And even if we could get access to events and be doing those on a global basis, there's still really high travel costs. And so our technology, we've manipulated over the last 18 months to focus on the needs of RASD companies and to look at how we can do that. So we're solving problems around logistics, where we can create virtual spaces to actually bring people together. The people you see in this video are all on different continents, able to work together and share work. We can bring decision makers together. You can walk someone around your robot. You can, in addition to that, you can get your team training. So we're working really closely with one of the major robotics companies who's involved in this project today. And we're helping them to train surgeons and train the surgical team how to set up the robot, get the correct sequence for plugging in, for draping, for patient manipulation. So really important work can be done there. And all of this can be done in a virtual environment really easily using a $600 VR headset. It's a fantastic opportunity. So as well as that, there's surgeon confidence, and this tends to be where VR has focused on in the past, making sure surgeons can practice the actual procedures. But what better than having a surgeon practice on his own than actually being able to get some form of proctoring? And it's the ability to bring people together in VR now that we're seeing really accelerate the knowledge base in this exciting field. So as well as that, I think one of the key things we've also got is the ability to, if you think about robotics companies have to bring all of their salespeople together, train them, all of their technical people together. And that's cost a lot of money in the past, in particular for some other well-known robotics companies. What we can now do for those people is to allow those individuals at home to practice on their own. It means they can have personal training, it means they can have one-to-one training with a mentor, and they can still attend group sessions. So here's a session that we ran recently where we've got over 40 people. This is in orthopedics, but it shows you the kind of capability that we're able to deploy now. You can allow people to work at their own pace and to join as a team into activity. So I guess that's kind of one of the key things that I wanted to get across. And in the final minute, to touch over some of the key things that you should be looking for from a good VR supplier. Somebody that's looking at expertise in life sciences and can focus on the needs of a life science company or a med device company. Somebody that can provide some form of surgical training certification. Leading edge technology, it takes a while to get VR working well with inverse kinematics, and somebody that's got some good history in this space. And it's all of those things that we think are important. So finally, to wrap up, whatever it is that your use case might be for VR in robotic assisted surgical devices, we'd love to talk to you. And I'll be going through more of this in details and giving a few case studies out later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. You know, we do have a couple minutes left on the clock. I'm kind of curious to get your comment on where do you feel that XR and VR is on the technology adoption curve?
That's a really great question. I think it's in different places, in different markets, and for different use cases. So what I mean by that is that we're working with some people who are developing new products in gene therapy, and it's particularly useful for them as they file or look to go to the FDA with their particular application. So that's really important there, but it's really almost in a research phase. Whereas if you look at Novartis, a client of ours, they've actually replaced all of their wet labs now with our VR solutions with haptics. So for them, they've leaps ahead. They'll never go back to wet labs in subretinal injections. And so that's a great step forward. But it's very different in different areas of the market. That's my answer to that.
So Chris, this is Alan Lamson. I think what's different. We've looked at almost every platform that's out there, and what surgeons are always focused on is the haptic feedback. They want to be able to feel the tools, and I think where fundamental surgery differentiates itself is that that's something you've focused on. How is that going to evolve in the future?
Yeah, great question. I mean, in terms of the way simulation is going to work, it's going to be going fully digital in a period of time. Let's say 7 years, for one of a better argument. So in 7 years to go fully digital, you can only get to that point and replace cadaver labs if you have some form of haptics. And that's why we've created a technology agnostic platform that can harness really the haptics that are coming out in the market now. So we've worked closely with companies like Haptex, the haptic glove manufacturers, and we've developed projects with them whereby we integrate their haptic devices into our simulation. So not only then can the trainee be holding a reamer and feel that using our robotic arms and feel reaming the acetabulum, but furthermore, they can then actually, using the haptic glove, go in and check to see if there's any osteophytes remaining. And so the technology or the platform is there and is ready to evolve as new technology comes out. And so in answer to your question, I think haptics are going to become increasingly important, and it's key for us to make sure that our platform is able to flex to add those technologies as we move forward.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
And again, members of the audience, Fundamental Surgery will be having a hop-in session, so please go along and find out more. And next on the agenda is Titronics. They will be talking about their Vulcan system, and I believe we have William Burris who will be joining us to talk more about that.
Yes, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, how are y'all doing?
Good, thanks.
All right, let's see if I can get my screen to properly share. No?
While we're doing this, I'd say that the first connection we had with Titronics was really through pumps and pipes. They work closely with NASA, and that was really our first interaction with them. Go ahead.
All right, can everybody see my screen now?
Yes, we can. You may want to go full screen. You're in presenter mode right now.
Let's see if I can get it to move.
There you go. Well, I just go with that.
All right.
That's good.
Yeah, can you see it?
Yeah.
All right. So the problem that we are working on here at Titronics with NASA really can humorously be stated. What if we cannot convince Dr. Lumsden to go to Mars? What if we cannot convince Panraj to bring all of his beautiful Siemens equipment to Mars to deal with, complex medically emergent situations? Despite the fact that astronauts, very bright, very hardworking, we have medically trained astronauts, they have to operate thousands of systems on a spacecraft, and many of these have critical functions. Additionally, you cram 4 people into a spacecraft and send them to Mars. There's an enormous number of physiological, mental, and psychological decrements that happen, making complex tasks very challenging. So, and another thing is, on the space station, we have real-time communication with astronauts. So medical emergencies can be dealt with either by crew members or flight surgeons on the ground. When we go to Mars, 20-minute one-way communication, so it takes 40 minutes, a complete loop of communication. That's not going to be very good if you have an emergent situation that requires immediate assistance. So what we have come up with is, we're not trying to make all the equipment better. We're trying to evolve the user interface, the human user interface, to be as intelligent as the equipment, to be nearly as intelligent as an expert who might otherwise train people on the ground. Okay, let's see. Try to start a video. All right. Let's see if it works. All right. You see this slide here? Sorry.
Yes.
All right, so very quickly, I'm going to talk about the technology stack briefly and walk you through it. I'm going to go do a deep dive and hop in, so I hope you join me there. Currently, the system that we're using on the Mars mission stuff. All right, I really don't want to start video, but it's going to force me to. is we're using Microsoft HoloLens. We've used an entire range of AR head mount displays in some of our R&D. HoloLens is one of the better ones. GE has graciously made 3 of their Vivid E95 ultrasound units that have a totally open interface. I can control anything inside the Vivid E95 through the HoloLens. So the other layer, this is where Zolt really helped us out, was for procedures in 3D space that require great spatial precision. We've invoked magnetic GPS, so we can get down to about 1.4 millimeters of spatial resolution in the space, showing someone what to do. The last thing is, even if you have a medical crew member that's trying to offer assistance, maybe they're not an expert in every little procedure, or maybe they haven't practiced it in a while, or what if they're not a medical crew member at all? What if they're just a Navy pilot? So the interface has to be able to adapt both the information, the speed, and how it gives instructional guidance based upon not only the user's background, but also their current state of competency. And the layer that drives all of this is we have a really interesting layer of artificial intelligence, again, providing dynamic instruction. It gives instruction in 3 dimensions, and it's anchored to the correct execution of tasks. If there is a ideal way to conduct a diagnostic ultrasound of a structure or system, that's what all the procedure is driving the user towards that. And again, it's very fast, 400 millisecond control loop for that. All right.
400 milliseconds.
One of the things that we use is we use structural reference points. So we build that into the system. So we do thousands of scans, including we can do scans of specific crew members, so that you're doing within subject referencing once you get out into space. So the system, the AI in the system, understands if you're trying to do a kidney examination, it knows what the structures of the kidney you should be finding in other reference points. So again, it's almost like a smart mentor guiding you through the HoloLens. Another thing is, in addition to the ultrasound imagery, again, we track both off-nominal, subnominal scans, right? So how to do it wrong, but also how to do it right. And in addition, if you can see my mouse over here to the left, this is the control interface where the user can control. Now, this is also important. Let's say that Zolt at Methodist wants to have his technicians do a specific scan or an ultrasound examination in a very specific way. He can program that in, and the system will reinforce that. So we have the Methodist specific ultrasound method that the systems at Methodist will be forcing the sonographers to conduct. All right, so if we roll everything up into sort of a nice little cartoon diagram, so we have all the background information, whether it's subject specific scans in the case of astronauts, if it's generic 3D models, we have all the reference information. If you have your procedure broken down to stepwise, that's presented in the HoloLens field of view. Also, instead of having to turn around and look at the medical device display screen, you can see the ultrasound output right there in your field of view. Again, if you have manufacturers who are willing to give you open access control to their device, we can control the device from the HoloLens. And again, as you saw, we have this layer of magnetic GPS that allows for highly precise, temporally and spatially reference information. All right, so let's get to what this thing really looks like. So on the top left here, this is the system about 4 to 5 years ago. And I'm going to walk through the different layers of what's going on. So if you see up here in the center, you have, we're doing a carotid assessment, right? So Zolt has given us his methodology for how to do that. It's simple canned stepwise procedure, okay? Here's the output from the display. In this case, I believe this is the Hilcerion, one of the probes that we work with. So it's a real-time display right there in your field of view. This right here, this is the first level of artificial intelligence. It has mapped the room out. It's mapped out. In this case, it's the mannequin. It knows where you should start placing the probe. So you can see you have these animations in there that constantly tell you where, in sort of somewhat gross spatial information, where you should be. Where's the carotid? How do you start? How do you do the sweep? Up to the left, you'll see this interesting sort of nomogram. And what this is that this is a little bit of a view of the secret sauce, the machine learning that's combining both the gross, where's the probe, what are you looking at, but also the image that you're acquiring. And again, we're using this as sort of like a joystick, astronauts flying things in. So the quality of the scan can be then, with the subtle manipulations, can be reinforced or you give the user feedback using this type of technology. If you go down to the bottom right, this is the user's view. So again, you see probe position, identification of radial or transverse. So again, walking the user through how to do it, but also making sure they do it correctly. All right. Today, for this intelligent interface, and again, we call it Vulcan. You have to give it a good, fun spaceflight name, the Visual Ultrasound Learning Control Analysis Network. We've worked with a number of different ultrasounds to date: GE's Vivity 95, Hilcerion, Clarius Portable, Butterfly IQ. The number of exams that we have worked into this are carotid assessment, fast exam, renal assessment, also identify pericardial effusion. Furthermore, in the recent phases of work for NASA, we've actually moved into ultrasound guided procedures. So for those that care to join me in the hop-in session, we will show you an actual guided pericardiocentesis through via Vulcan. All right. So here are some other, so in addition to AR for NASA, we do this for a range of other private sector and also government partners. So we have AR applications for preoperative planning and intraoperative guidance using the HoloLens. We're working with Baylor College of Medicine. They've developed a microendoscope used for cancer screening in low resource environments. So we have a AR head mount display that gives the operator all the information and also simple controls. One of the more interesting projects we're working on with Washington University St. Louis is cancer vision goggles. They're developing a de novo novel AR head mount display that enables surgeons to see cancer cells, and that is patient specific, that are labeled with a tumor specific antibody for that patient. They can see in real time intraoperatively, so they can see the tumor, but more importantly, they can see the actual margins of that tumor again, so they can do a proper resection and not have to come back and do surgery again. For NASA, we have optical coherence tomography. For those that are familiar with NASA, we have some difficulties with eye distortions and retinal nerve distortions with microgravity. So understanding eye status is very important to NASA. The last speaker did a great job on some VR stuff. We also are funded by NIH. We're developing a suite of mixed reality training tools for clinical laboratory. So from anything from setup, operation, and cleaning that can be done before entering the clinical suite.
Sorry, William, I got to cut you off there, sir. This is exceptionally interesting. I do need to respect other people's times after you. So please, members of the audience, this conversation will continue in the hop-in sessions. So please make your way over. Thank you very much for joining us. Next on the list, we have a representative from Touch of Life Technologies. They are creating a very fabulous anatomical training unit, and we're actually trying to work with Texas A&M as part of their NMed program to get that unit here at MIRI for some of the NMed curriculum. So representing Touch of Life, we had Greg Spitzer, who is the CEO, and let's hear a little bit more from Greg.
Hi, Stuart. Thanks. Thanks for having us involved in this symposium, and yeah, look forward to working with everybody. So as you mentioned, what Touch of Life does is really focused on real anatomy and visualizing that in different ways, using it in different teaching environments, training environments, and ultimately healthcare education. So, as I mentioned, it's really based on real anatomy, and that's kind of the key to the whole thing, is that everything you see in our products is either from a visible human or other data sets. Those are photographic cross sections taken through a real human body that we can then visualize and render in 3D. Or clinical data sets when we want to bring in some pathology, maybe get a little deeper into neuroanatomy and other areas that aren't as well visualized. We can bring in some patient-specific information, and particularly with some of our products in conjunction with Sectra medical imaging. Kind of just jumping through, quickly the platform. Curriculum integration is another big part. So as everybody else has shown here, you can have great technologies, but you really need a instructional content that will take learners through their training or educational objectives. And so we have a nice system for integrating that and allowing
Hey,
people
Greg, how
to
you doing,
build
sir?
out.
Can you hear
Yes.
me? Sorry, we actually can't see your slides. Would you mind sharing your screen so we can see your slides?
My gosh.
But you're looking really good.
Thanks. Let me get back to the Zoom.
We'll give you 30 seconds back.
Share screen. Here we go. Desktop one.
There we go.
How about that?
Perfect.
All right. So the quick image you missed on real anatomy clinical imaging. So again, this is the foundations of what we do. On the left side, you see the visible human. So that's real photographic anatomy. And then in partnership with Sectra, for some of our products, the clinical imaging aspects that are brought into some of the systems. Jumping onto the curriculum integration piece. So as I mentioned, really important to provide instructional content. You can't just have a body sitting there in space that people can play with. That doesn't do a lot for education. So being able to allow people to build out their own content and providing our own. And so this is kind of an overview of the full platform, though today we're really focusing on that VR XR piece, which we really believe is, the future of a lot of things and a lot of training in healthcare, and particularly anatomy, which lends itself well. So this is our future slide. Nice CRT monitors and everything. We've been doing things in VR for 20 years, and we're really excited that in the last 3 or 4 years, the technology, the hardware technology and systems, we feel like have caught up with the imaging and technology that we had behind them. So now we can do much more exciting things. The cost is way down. Your ability to move around and interact in different ways and put it in different people's hands is just getting better and better every day. So with that, let's look at a few videos and examples of using these different technologies in our software within these different environments. So starting out with VR, this is kind of where we started and where most people started, a fully virtual environment. And this shows our real anatomical data sets. I can move in, identify structures, remove them, interact with them in different ways. Over there on the lower left, you see a little piece of it, but there's an instructional panel. So that's where, as a instructor or educational environment, I would provide instructions to the user on what to do. I can adjust what the user's seeing by having them follow links. I can show videos and other content that relate to the anatomy and just provide a nice learning experience to take them through the anatomy. And then kind of continuing on to bring in some MRI data more recently. So visualizing different structures of the of neuroanatomy, and a nice 7 Tesla scan of a brain from one of the instructors we work with, actually scanned her own head to figure out what was inside. Taking that into some more kind of training environments. And so the last speaker mentioned the HoloLens. That's one of the devices we work with for AR. And so here we've overlaid that real anatomy so you can see real detailed photographic anatomy overlaid with this mannequin simulation, so that when they're talking about a T-tube insertion in this case, they can explore the relevant anatomy, trachea and esophagus, the lobes of the lung, at the same time. And that may be something that you do, as you're performing it, or it may be one of those, let's stop, take a step back, look at the anatomy, look at why maybe you had difficulties getting the tube through a certain point, or what structures you're affecting. And a little less clinical video here. So this is just kind of showing really the reality of the whole thing. So this is in a dissection lab at the University of Colorado. And this is using a fantastic headset, the Vario XR3, where we can actually bring in video, but in super high resolution. So you really don't feel like you have a headset on. So kind of taking that augmented reality of the HoloLens, but bringing in the fidelity of VR and merging those into a single environment. And here you can see the cross-sectional data moving through those sections of the body, interacting with different structures, and just working with this truly real anatomy in a kind of hyper-realistic space. And we think that's hugely important. I mean, you're talking about virtual reality, you need reality. and having cartoon drawings of anatomical structures that you're, manipulating isn't really what you want your physician to experience, or your trainees or your medical students. And so that's basically what we do, is all about, like I said, real anatomy, virtual anatomy, and we're excited about what the future brings. If anybody wants to reach out, as others have mentioned, we have a hop-in session where Jake Shearer, our product manager, is going to get much more in depth with some of the curriculum content, how this is being used in academics and training. But I just want to give you kind of a quick intro to what we do and how exciting we think the future of it all is.
So that was fascinating. You're bringing reality. You need a little formalin sprays so that when you're wearing that headset, you get sprayed with formalin, because anybody who's gone through anatomy lab knows you stink for a couple of days after being in there. So that's the next level in virtual reality, huh? Can you give us some idea?
I'm not sure though. Is that an advantage, or
I don't know. I mean, it's
do we want to bring that in, or do we not want to bring
how
that
you were branded as a medical student? So, how is it being deployed right now?
Yeah, so I think you asked earlier with fundamental surgery, kind of what is the level of VR and XR adoption across different groups, and I think his answer was great about it. It really varies. So we have a variety of medical students kind of learning how to use it in different ways. So small group interactions, primarily for medical education really at this point, less on the healthcare training aspect so far. But a lot of people are learning, and COVID's really put on one hand, it's a great jump start to virtual instruction. But on the other hand, when people are thinking about getting in like a mixed reality environment around each other to interact with anatomy, it's not really a great thing to be doing in a COVID era. And on top of it, you really need, a lot of different headsets, for example, to use them safely in the past year and a half. So that's been a barrier, is an uptick in the academic environment, is you can't just have one or two headsets where people come in and have these experiences every few minutes, because that just doesn't work well. So yeah, to answer your question, I mean, I think a lot of people are figuring out how it's going to fit into their educational environment, but they know that it's going there, and they see a lot of the advantages that it can bring in understanding the body.
Yeah, so I'm British. I trained in the British system, and the joke for us was always that anatomy is an elective subject in US medical schools because it's not taught to the same level. So anything that stimulates interest in learning anatomy. A great application for this, if we could have procedure-specific modules, where a resident can go in and kind of rehearse a procedure, because we tend to know anatomy in little local regions that allow us to actually do the procedures. But this is very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. So moving on to our second last talk of the day, it's actually a representative from Intuitive. We have Rich Mahoney, and they're going to be talking about the work they're doing with XR over at Intuitive. Rich, can you hear us, sir?
I can, yes. How are you today?
Good, thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity to be here. I'm going to share my screen and talk to a few slides. So what I'd like to do is share a little bit of a perspective from Intuitive Surgical around XR technology, and from the perspective of as I've been thinking through how to guide the development and evolution of XR technology at Intuitive, really thinking about it as building on top of the adoption that already exists for robotic assisted surgery. And so this perspective really starts from, I want to go back to maybe the first principles on robot assisted surgery, and many people who are watching today understand this, but just going back to the basic view that we are augmenting minimally invasive surgery. We are assisting the surgeons to carry out a procedure that has many benefits for patients. And the original system that was introduced by the founders of Intuitive Surgical back in the mid-90s was really designed to to augment laparoscopic surgery with a new kind of robotic assisted system. And a key part of this, so I'm showing you here the robot end of it, but the key innovation beyond the robot was the console interface. And a lot of people may not recall, but if you go back to some of the literature of the time, you will see that the first prototypes were actually the VR headsets of the day with data gloves, and evaluating those as the interface to do this new Da Vinci robot. And it was determined that those systems were actually not sufficient for surgeons to conduct surgery. And so so what I like to say is that, so they built this console, and if you really use your imagination, you can actually imagine this console as a VR headset that is designed to augment and extend the capability of the surgeon, but also to include a physical manipulation system. So there's a few things here that become apparent, is that XR can be thought of really broadly. And I think there's a lot of amazing technology, but it's not just the visual representation and augmenting vision. It's also augmenting other aspects of our sensory system. So that physical extension of the surgeon into the body cavity through the robot is actually another example of XR technology, I believe. And so at Intuitive, we really think about this broadly, how do we improve patient outcomes by extending and enhancing the surgeon's skill, and really building on what now is 25 years of progress in the market. 1.2 million procedures in 2020, over 8.5 million procedures total. And our goal now, as we innovate, is how do we build on top of this product that is in the market and continue to add value. And so, a simple example is being able to augment the visual image that the surgeon has, and so being able to do things like taking CT scans and make them available during the surgery as a reference. And here's an example of an emerging product from Intuitive, and it's not making use of VR goggles or any of the latest and greatest hardware that's emerging, but it just demonstrates a way to use XR technology in a new way within our existing product. So in addition to the hardware I've seen in many of the talks today, I think it is important to recognize that the opportunity for XR extends beyond the devices itself and into the ecosystem around the system, the training that's required, the ability to just plan, and also just marketing. All of those elements also represent other areas where XR technology can bring advantages. So we do think about this ecosystem. We think about the patients, the teams, and the surgeons themselves, and it builds on the learning capabilities that already exist at Intuitive. So we had just recently introduced the My Intuitive app, which is allowing surgeons to have access to the data from their procedures. And we're looking at how can we expand the information that's available. You can think about telepresence as another capability, being able to monitor and observe the surgery remotely, being able to enhance teleproctoring and telementoring. And actually during COVID, we did see a tripling of the use of our telepresence systems. And I think I like to point out and recognize that there is a lot of opportunity to impact surgical practice today. Again, building on the existing base of surgeons and install base of systems, over 90% of our systems are connected to the cloud. We've been doing this for 10 years. We now have an extensive simulation environment and over 12,000 people that are registered and using our SimNow software, for instance. So we're really excited about the opportunity to continue to build on all of this capability, and excited also to see all of the innovation that's emerging in the market around this technology. So I will be. I have a hop-in session in a few minutes after this one, and I'll spend a little bit more time going into more detail on some of our technologies, and look forward to discussing, having good conversation with participants in that session.
Thank you, Rich. That was very interesting, and I'd love to ask you a question. What is the biggest technological limitation currently that you guys are trying to kind of solve?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that if you going back to the fact that we're building these solutions on top of our existing customer base, it's really being able to deliver those solutions in a way where there's validated benefit, validated outcomes, improvements in learning, and so the access and the features, I guess, the resolution, the access that enables, is that actually giving a benefit? And I think that's the key thing, is that there's a lot of things that we're able to prototype and demonstrate, but when we begin to explore the actual impact, and we're finding that that there's still a need for higher resolution, higher bandwidth, in order to give real benefits over the current ways that things are being done.
Can I ask one question? And that is, obviously you have a very specific training program for new users. Do you think it'll ever get to the point that there's enough fidelity in simulation that the FDA will say, okay, you don't necessarily need to do clinical cases, just do, instead of 5 clinical cases, do 50 simulated cases, and then you're good to go? I mean, what's the gap that everyone's afraid of?
Yeah, I really love that perspective. And so I'm the VP of research, right? So I get to think about what can the world be like, and I like to think in terms of inevitability. So is this inevitable or not? And my view is that it is what you're describing, and I think the key there is going back again to, can we actually document and measure the skill that is attained through the training, and then can we validate that the skill that is achieved through the simulated or the XR enabled training is equivalent to that which you get through your procedures or otherwise. And so I think that it will eventually get there, but it will require us to document very clearly that the skill that is being developed using these advanced technologies matches the skill and maybe even exceeds the skill in the current methods.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you for that insight there. Last on the agenda, we have Karen Schneider representing Time Studio. Time Studio does some incredible things, including integrating the aspect of gamification into the way that we learn, and kind of teach ourselves through the medium of VR and XR, etc. So Karen, I don't believe she is there.
Hey, welcome.
Oh,
thank you.
Hey, Karen, over to you. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me here and allowing me to be a part of this. It's always great seeing all these really cool endeavors going on, and there's a lot that's going on in terms of gamification to augment some of these serious applications that you're talking about. So I'm just here to highlight some of that. So when it comes to kind of where things are going or how they're going, I would say that, let me just pull this to full screen mode. Can you still see it?
Yeah, full screens came up now. Perfect.
Perfect. Okay, so when it comes to where we're heading and why we are going there, most people, when they think of a game or a entertainment property, they don't see it as having things that could be viable to their needs of solving their problems, especially in serious use. But when you think about where simulations are going, it's all about changing the outcomes. And especially in healthcare, we're seeing some amazing applications come out and ways that we can encourage how these outcomes or behaviors can be amplified. So when you think about what a video game is, bottom line is it's data. It's data made beautiful and highly engaging. And I like to always say that if you want to really have and engage with your data, you want to play with it. And when you look at where healthcare games are going, we had our first prescribed FDA approved video game that came out in 2020. So we're seeing just the whole concept, especially usually for mental or healthcare related mental disorders that have to do with actually having a video game that can be used to realign the neurological impulses that people have. And of course, training, you've seen this, Dr. Kaur, with a lot of, hey, can you please help me train? And most of the use cases we saw today had to do with training. And not only for the patients, but also for the residents or the surgeons or other doctors. And then, of course, some things we use are more navigational to our environments or ways that we can leverage, especially inpatient or outpatient services, and how they can project long-term in terms of behavioral change. So one of the facets that we've been really encouraged with as a studio that is out to train young folks and see jobs emerge, it has been the trends in healthcare of folks realizing that a video game is not just about entertainment. It really is about, especially for patients, being able to change their behaviors. And Dr. Petrino, really cool gent who we worked with during the Healthcare Games Showdown, which was an event we ran over at Texas Medical Center a couple years back in terms of video games for healthcare. He has some great studies in regards to the plasticity of the brain that changes when you add in fun, especially storylines. This is very important because story undergirds us and it allows us at the end of the day here to create memories. And we want memories because that's at the end of the day, especially in training, what we're trying to do. We're trying to help our brains see something. So this is where we're seeing it utilized, of course, in things like behavioral for mental health changes and disorders. We're seeing it, of course, used in rehabilitation within the future, hopefully water-based therapy treatments as we blend technologies. We are seeing elements of games being encouraged for training of the doctors. And in this case, this is a mobile example where we're seeing just simulation reinforcement. We're seeing, of course, a lot in surgery, especially now as we start to mix in AI to say, hey, could we see ways or patterns that we can inherently add to a concept? We are seeing in hospital at-home care, this is a title that we developed for Texas Children's Hospital, ways to enforce, instead of walking home with a binder, ways to say, hey, change your lifestyle here, and actually get whole different flows or patterns of people being able to respond to and being a part of their recovery journey, which, every doctor usually complains about, hey, if only my patients listened, they would do it so much better. And yourself as one of the leaders in the space and other folks are dialing in and saying, if we could engage in other ways that gamify, incentivize, and encourage, we could see more amplification. Now, in terms of some of the risks, when we are thinking about these cool things that you just saw lots of them today from various partners, it's very important to realize how much the software plays an impact here, because we have the actual experience is really the software base, not the hardware. The hardware is fantastic. It's absolutely imperative to seeing these things come about. But if the software is not built out to handle the conversion, then we're going to have problems. So lack of planning has been a real issue that I've consistently seen by folks who just don't understand the scope of what it takes, and then not understanding how important story is. Everyone has a story, even if it's a serious use story. Doctors who are good trainers will often bring this out because they'll do things like, hey, this patient had this problem and that one patient had that problem, and they seek to leverage how did we solve that problem through story. It also takes a lot of people to make these type of simulations, and you can't underscope. It's doing a video game is like a movie with technology, at least if you really want to do it right and fitting your needs. And a lot of folks are not as familiar with how much the hardware impacts the creation of the 3D itself. You can always dumb down a 3D within reason, but you can never take a low resolution 3D and then bump it up to high resolution. So your polygon count and how you handle your shading and how you handle your textures has to go from the very beginning of a project to be dependent on the hardware choices. And of course, hardware choices are also where sometimes we see things like how long could this project be viable or the shelf life it has. So when it comes to also skills, this is why we have Time Studio, because we know that the people want to hire these folks. We know that this is important to the journey, but having said that, you don't always find it. So we are here to see that we are creating a bridge to help to fulfill these coming roles. So thank you to being a part of the processes in this community so we can see more serious simulations built out by training young talent and saying, hey, let's get in there, let's see them scope out real world problems, and let's bring results to our community. So Healthcare Game Showdown was one of the events we ran. We also ran the XR Showdown last year with ExxonMobil as our presenting sponsor. And at the end of the day, our goal here is to continue to augment and see your projects and all your cool ideas and your problems be solved through gamification, simulation work, and software development.
Okay, Karen, thank you very much for that. You know, we love what you guys are doing. It's very exciting. I love how it just retains talent as well here within the Houston ecosystem. So yeah, looking forward to doing some really cool work with you guys in the future. Again, just to, you know, Karen will be leading the last session in Hopin, and the Hopin session goes until 12:30. We're about 2-3 minutes away from closing up in the studio. So Karen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it.
So closing out, I would just like to bring up one event that's coming up on December the 6th, and I have a wee slide there. So this is a save the date. It's almost that time of year again. Pumps and Pipes, December the 6th this year. I think we're going with the topic of Crystal Spectrum, the unique original. So please save your date for that. Personally, I would absolutely like to thank all the participants and speakers who have made today possible. It's absolutely phenomenal, your participation, your eagerness to get involved. I also want to thank the team here at Houston Methodist. To members of the audience, it's really hard to put in words just the amount of work that goes into these events. So everyone from Video Production Studio, everyone from MIRI, all the in-house staff, thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Lumsden.
Well, Stuart, congratulations to you. When I looked at the schedule, my first thought was, you're out of your mind. We're never going to get through this, and we're going to be running 2 hours behind. So the fact that it's been kept on time is thank you to you and your bell. I think that may have to be adopted for future symposia. And again, thanks for all the people who participated. The whole concept of this is try to help build this ecosystem here in Houston and beyond. And anyone who's interested in imaging, robotics, the VR things, please get in touch with us. This is a new concept for us and a new program we're trying to develop, and we're looking for partners going forward. So thanks for doing all the hard work and the heavy lifting for this.
I think on that note, that's a wrap. Have a good day. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
You play it from there.
Yeah. It's not letting me do anything. Killy time.